Chapter 27. It took 2 days to dry the sesame. Suli took out the glutinous rice that she used to make zongzi last time, ground it into powder and dried it. Then she separated the white sesame and black sesame. The black sesame and sugar were used to make stuffing, and the white sesame was fried and put aside. After Mammy Lee made the sugar water, Suli poured the glutinous rice powder into it. She mixed it into the soft and hard glutinous rice ball. Then she kneaded it into small bowl-shaped stuffing. After wrapping it again, she put it into the sesame plate with a layer of water. Mammy Lee was standing next to her. She watched her Mrs. Smooth cooking skills, and she was dumbfounded. The second miss did laundry and chopping firewood when she was a child. She had never been to the kitchen. How could she be so skilled? Was she a so-called genius? When Mammy Lee was in a daze, Suli had finished all the rest of the glutinous rice balls with sesame. The last step was to explode them. Explode them? How much oil, and it is dangerous. Why don't you let me? Suli shook her head and didn't move away. She said, "These are to be sold. If you don't control the heat well, all the efforts will be wasted." Sell them? Mammy Lee was shocked. "I gave the poor brother and sister 500 taels last time." It was a little impulsive. "However, I can also sell things to make money." Suli held the spatula and said playfully, "They don't look delicious at all. Can they make money?" Mammy Lee was worried, but she didn't say it. The second miss was talented, but she couldn't succeed every time. The zongzi last time was amazing. This time, the glutinous rice balls with sesame were really pockmarked. They didn't look beautiful at all. She poured 3 small bowls of oil. Mammy Lee was responsible for lighting the fire. After a while, the oil temperature was 40% hot. Suli immediately poured all the glutinous rice balls with sesame into it. The sound of frying was endless. Suli was calm. When the oil temperature rose to 60%, the glutinous rice balls with sesame floated up one by one. She pressed them gently with the spatula. After several times, the glutinous rice balls with sesame were no longer flattened. The color changed from the original pale to golden. She carefully picked up the glutinous rice balls with sesame and put them on a plate. Mammy Lee came over to have a look. She couldn't help but exclaim, "How can they become so beautiful? They are golden and seem to be translucent. And they are so round, just like big golden pearls." Suli smiled slightly. After the fried glutinous rice balls were drained of oil, she put them into the basket one by one. She picked up one and took a bite. The sweet taste immediately escaped, and Mammy Lee swallowed saliva. "Nanny, you should eat too. After you finish eating, we can sell it in town. It won't taste good if it gets cold." Mammy Lee quickly waved her hand and said, "How can I eat it? Miss wants to exchange it for money." Suli was unmoved, so Mammy Lee could only take it and take a bite carefully. She couldn't stop eating it. She stuffed the whole glutinous rice ball with glutinous rice into her mouth in a few seconds and said vaguely, "It's so delicious. It smells so good. Miss, you can definitely make a lot of money if you sell it." "Thank you, Mammy Lee, for your help." After Suli handed the basket to Mammy Lee and said a few words, Mammy Lee left the Jinyuan court doubtfully. At the same time, Yang Wei arrived at the Su residence. Behind him, a group of servants carried boxes of betrothal gifts. "What's that smell?" Yang Wei sniffed and felt that his saliva was secreted quickly. At this time, Mammy Lee came out of the Jinyuan court absent-mindedly. Yang Wei immediately shouted, "Whose Mammy is over there? Come here." Mammy Lee didn't hear it at all and hurriedly walked out of the gate of the Su residence. Yang Wei was so angry that his nose was almost crooked. Now even the old mammy of the Su residence dared to give him a hard time. No one leads the way. I will find it myself." Yang Wei turned back and ordered, "You move all these to the main courtyard." I will come later. After that, Yang Wei followed the fragrance and walked away, leaving the servants looking at each other in dismay. The glutinous rice ball with glutinous rice ball with glutinous rice ball with sesame was still very fragrant. Yang Wei found the gate of the Jinyuan court with little effort. It's strange. I remember that no one lives in this courtyard. Is it a distinguished guest of the Su family? Yang Wei looked curious. He directly swaggered into the gate of the Jinyuan court without informing anyone. When the guards at the gate saw the first young master of the Yang family, they all turned a blind eye and pretended not to see him. They all heard that the Yang family and the Su family were going to unite by marriage. Maybe Yang Wei would soon become the son-in-law of the Su family. The Jinyuan court was carefully decorated by Zhu Yan. Every tree and every flower was precious and elegant, showing the beauty of the Jinyuan court. Yang Wei was amazed. The Su family was richer than the Yang family. Such a courtyard could not be seen in the Yang family. As a result, Yang Wei became even more curious about who lived here. Passing through the breezy corridor, Yang Wei came to the courtyard with lush vines. He stood at the door and was suddenly stunned by the picturesque scene in front of him. In the quiet courtyard, there were simple stone tables and rattan chairs. On the rattan chair, a woman who was more perfect than a fairy was lying on the rattan chair. Her long skirt was dragging on the ground. The woman held a scroll in her hand and closed her eyes slightly. It seemed that she had fallen asleep. Yang Wei could not extricate himself from the perfect side face. His eyes were full of obsession. He had long forgotten the purpose of coming to the Su house. There is such a beautiful woman in this world. If I can marry her and spend the night with her, it will be worth it even if I die immediately. I used to think that Su Zipei's appearance was not bad, but now I see her. Su Zipei is like chaff, which is hard to swallow. Yang Wei was so excited that he couldn't control himself, but he didn't rush in, for fear of disturbing the fairy and letting her fly away in front of him. But his heavy breathing finally woke Su Li up from her light sleep. What? As soon as Su Li opened her eyes, she saw Yang Wei who looked like a pig at the door. She suddenly felt bad and her expression was slightly cold. Why did Yang Wei come here? According to this person's lustful and shameless temperament, she was afraid that he would directly ask Su Huanli or even propose to her. The light in Su Li's eyes turned sharply. After a while, she suddenly smiled, showing a charming appearance. Yang Wei was so excited that he almost fainted. When he was about to say a few words, he didn't expect that there was a hot flow in his nose and he had a nosebleed. Oh no! Yang Wei fled, leaving a pool of blood on the ground. Su Li walked lightly and took out the black shell from her arms and put it next to the blood. The poisonous insect in the shell smelled the blood and immediately crawled out. It began to suck the blood on the ground. At the same time, intermittent sounds came from the body of the poisonous insect. Beauty, delicious, fairy, fairy, the voice was exactly the same as Yang Wei's. Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly. After the poisonous insect cleaned up the blood on the ground and returned to the black shell, she picked up the shell and turned back to the room. Maybe the plan needed to be changed a little. At the gate of the main courtyard, a group of anxious servants of the Yang family were relieved when they saw Yang Wei coming. Master, you are finally here. If you delay any longer, it will be too late. Master, why do you have a nosebleed? Master, are you okay? A group of servants came up and talked at once. Yang Wei waved his hand impatiently and scolded, a group of useless things. Shut up. The air was silent for an instant. Yang Wei wiped his nose and walked into the main courtyard with servants. He immediately put on a gentle and elegant face. Su Huanli had been waiting in the room. Seeing Yang Wei coming late, he didn't show his displeasure. Instead, he smiled and said, Nephew, you really keep your promise. Today, you bring the betrothal gift. I will let Zipei come here. Wait. Yang Wei stopped Su Huanli with one hand. He got up and tidied his clothes and said, "Uncle, in fact, I have a presumptuous request today." "Oh." Su Huanli was still smiling. "Nephew, please say it." "Today, you entered the Jinyuan court by mistake." Su Huanli's face changed when he heard the first sentence. "I saw a girl who is more perfect than the fairy in the painting." "Uncle, may I ask which family she is so that I can get to know her?" Su Huanli's smile gradually disappeared and his tone became cold. "Master Yang, you already have my Zipei. I am afraid that it is inappropriate to inquire about other girls at this time." "Uncle, you are wrong. It is normal for a man to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. I see that you also married a second wife. Why can't you marry 2 misses at a time?" Su Huanli was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He had never seen such a shameless bastard. Arya was his favorite now. He couldn't let her marry Yang Wei, the scum. Moreover, Arya's talent in cooking was unparalleled. Only the Zongzi made the income of the Baiwei building soar by 30%. If he really took over the Baiwei building in the future, he still needed Arya's help. Thinking of this, Su Huanli sneered, "To tell you the truth, it is my second daughter who lives in the Jinyuan court." Yang Wei's eyes suddenly became brighter than a light bulb. It would be easy if she was the daughter of the Su family. He could marry her instead of Zipei. "But Master Yang, do you remember that you and Zipei took the night luminescent pearl of the Su family and framed another person?" As soon as Su Huanli said this, Yang Wei was immediately like being struck by lightning. He said with a pale face, "Is it, yes?" Su Huanli mercilessly pierced the last fantasy of Yang Wei. "The person you and Zipei framed is her. For this reason, my second daughter was wronged for no reason and even suffered family punishment. For this reason, I will never marry my second daughter to you." Yang Wei's face had long been pale without any blood. It was not easy for him to meet the fairy in his dream. He didn't expect that he had a relationship with her long ago and the situation was the worst. It seems that Master Yang needs to think about it carefully. "I can't accept the betrothal gift. Take it back first. It's not too late to come back when Master Yang thinks it through one day. Butler, see the guest out." Li Yin, who was eavesdropping outside the door, secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He quickly came over and said, "Master Yang, please." Yang Wei walked away absent-mindedly. Su Huanli was so angry that he threw several teacups to calm down. He said gloomily, "Who does he think he is? Can he marry and change the daughter of the Su family as he wants? It's outrageous." Su Huanli was angry, but there was another person who was even angrier than him. He almost vomited blood. "What? Master even wants to marry Zipei to the little bastard of the Yang family?" Zhu Yan's sharp eyes stared at Su Zipei, who stood aside in silence. Su Zipei immediately lowered her head and said nothing. In the face of her daughter's acquiescence, Zhu Yan felt that her internal organs were burning and she almost fainted. Chapter 28. "Mother, what's wrong with Cousin Yang? He is now a high-ranking official, and I am the wife of an official. I don't need to care about anyone. What's wrong with that?" Su Zipei retorted confidently. Crack. Su Zipei felt a sharp pain in her palm. She looked up and saw her mother's disappointed eyes. She couldn't understand it at all. Her mother taught her how to curry favor with the powerful and make friends with the rich and powerful. But why did her mother just not approve of her decision? "Mother, I don't accept it. Mother is not an official. How can I find a better husband than Yang Wei? If there is, please show it to me. Otherwise, I must marry Cousin Yang today." Zhu Yan was so angry that she even had the thought of killing people. She saw no one around and there was no trace of eavesdropping. She made a decision in an instant. Seeing that her mother closed the doors and windows in the daytime, Su Zipei was puzzled. "Mother, what are you doing?" At this time, Zhu Yan had found the secret compartment and took out the jade pendant from under the dresser. Su Zipei was surprised. "Mother, what is this?" Why have I never seen you take it out? It is related to your future. When Zhu Yan said the first sentence, she suddenly felt relaxed. It was so easy to share the secret. She had carried the secret alone for more than 10 years, and her body was about to be crushed. After an hour, Su Zipei covered her mouth and fell into extreme shock. She had never thought that her mother had been so mysterious all these years, all for her. She didn't expect that Su Arya was not her mother's biological daughter, and her origin was so extraordinary. Mother! What should I do now? I can't marry Yang Wei, or how can I marry the prince and the general in the future? Su Zipei suddenly panicked. There was a chance to become a phoenix. She would not marry Yang Wei, the idiot. Don't worry. I will find a way. Now we are of one mind, and things will be much easier. Don't tell anyone about the jade pendant. If others know our plan, it will be dangerous. Zhu Yan carefully told her. Su Zipei nodded firmly. Don't worry, mother. When I become a princess, I will let you enjoy all the glory and wealth in the world. Good. Good. Zhu Yan's eyes were wet. Pearl is my good daughter. Zhu Yan hurried to the main courtyard to find Su Huanli. Unexpectedly, she got the news that Yang Wei changed his mind and cancelled the marriage proposal. This was undoubtedly a great surprise to him, and he immediately returned to tell his daughter the news. On the other side, the old butler came to the Jinyuan court. He was also scared to death by Su Li's appearance. It seems that the second miss has followed Qi Xianqing to practice. What kind of cultivation method is this? It can make the second miss so beautiful. No wonder Yang Wei couldn't control himself and changed his mind on the spot. Grandpa Butler, did cousin Yang really say so? Su Li looked worried and muttered, but master said that I can't get married. Although Su Li's voice was as small as a mosquito, it was still heard by Li Yin, who had cultivation. Qi Xianqing asked second miss to keep her virginity. It seems to be a decent cultivation method. If it really is the He Huan faction, that old fellow should be very happy for miss to have an illicit relationship with a man. Li Yin was a little relieved. At this time, Mammy Li came in from the outside with an empty basket and said loudly, Miss, I went to the town to sell fried glutinous rice balls with sesame as you said. As expected, they were sold out quickly. The profit is 3 taels of silver. We don't have to starve. Really? That's great. Su Li pretended to be surprised, but she thought that Mammy Li came at the right time. What fried glutinous rice balls with sesame? What starve? Li Yin was confused, and then he was shocked and angry. Second miss, did the first madam take away all the 500 taels of silver again? Butler, it's not what you think. Before Su Li spoke, Mammy Li explained first, the second miss is too kind. After listening to the ins and outs of Mammy Li, the old butler suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. No one would give alms to others without taking care of their own food and clothing. The second miss was too reckless. However, if not, there would be no fried glutinous rice balls with sesame. Now the Lord's mind was not strong, and he needed fried glutinous rice balls with sesame to consolidate. Thinking of this, Li Yin asked, Second miss, are there more fried glutinous rice balls with sesame? I will take them back for the Lord to taste. Seeing that Li Yin was hooked, Su Li immediately smiled and said, all the fried glutinous rice balls with sesame have been sold by Mammy Li, but there are still a lot of materials. I will make some now. Wait a moment, Mr. Butler. Haha, I will also help you. Li Yin smiled extremely kindly. I have never seen the second miss cook with my own eyes. Su Li's eyes flickered slightly, but she said in a tone of showing off, then, Mr. Butler, you can see it. Li Yin laughed out loud, but thought in his heart, this girl shows a rare confidence when cooking. It doesn't seem to be intentional. Li Yin traveled in Jianghu in those years, so he naturally had a very keen sense of smell. All kinds of coincidences in the past few months let him see a trace of abnormality, but he never found out who was behind the scenes. Qi Xianqing, this old guy is too mysterious, and his means must be superb. It's reasonable that I can't detect it. Li Yin sighed softly in his heart. At that time, when they fought in the west courtyard, he saw that he and Qi Xianqing were aware of it. If they really fought, he would definitely be no match for him. The unique fragrance of fried glutinous rice balls with sesame wafted out from the kitchen again. Li Yin swallowed his saliva when he saw it. He had traveled all over the country and eaten many delicacies, but none of them could compare with the second miss cooking in person. Thinking of this, it was lucky to stay in the Su house, at least his appetite was very satisfied. Second miss, your cooking skills are good enough to be a chef in a big restaurant. It's really amazing. After tasting the fried glutinous rice balls with sesame, Li Yin exclaimed. Su Li smiled shyly, Mr. Butler, you must be joking. I'm still far from that. And Mr. Butler will definitely not let me be a chef. Haha, I'm just kidding. Li Yin wiped the grease off his mouth and said with a smile, Miss, you've worked hard. I'll send the fried glutinous rice balls with sesame to the Lord. It doesn't matter. Goodbye, Mr. Butler. Arya is going to study. Li Yin left with a smile, but he thought that the name, Su Arya, didn't match with the second Mississippi. Should he suggest the Lord to give the second miss a new name? Otherwise, he couldn't say it in front of outsiders. In the study. Is this the fried glutinous rice balls with sesame newly developed by Arya? Su Huanli picked up a fried glutinous rice ball with sesame in surprise and looked at it up and down. It's as round as a pearl. How did she make it? Arya is really amazing. Li Yin then told him that Su Li did a good deed with 500 taels of silver. Su Huanli's face immediately darkened. This girl is too simple. Look, how did Mr. Qi teach her? Maybe the brother and sister are liars. Lord, if there is no loss, there must be gain. If there is no such thing, how can the fried glutinous rice balls with sesame be produced? Li Yin tried to smooth things over. Su Huanli's face turned from gloomy to sunny. He laughed loudly and said, That's right. It's predetermined. In this way, even if the old guy Li Shanbao withdrew all the cooks, I don't have to worry. Arya is really the treasure of our Su family. How can Yang Wei deserve her? Absolutely. Li Yin echoed, and his worried heart finally returned to his stomach. This time, even if Yang Wei offered a higher price, the master would not agree. After a few days of fermentation, a snack called fried glutinous rice ball with sesame gradually became popular in the county of Desu town. Every day when Mammy Li went to the market of Desu town, she would be surrounded by a large group of people. The fried glutinous rice ball with sesame would be sold out without shouting. A carriage suddenly passed by the market. Li Shanbao was sitting in it with a sad face, but he was still attracted by the bustle over there. He couldn't help but ask, Advisor, the market is so noisy. What happened? The advisor who followed the carriage immediately went down to ask. After a while, he came back and said in detail, It's an old woman who is selling a snack called fried glutinous rice ball with sesame. It's the same in the market these days. I heard that no one cared about the woman at the beginning when she came to the market. But when she opened the cloth on the basket, she immediately attracted a large number of people. Li Shanbao was hungry because of the words. He couldn't help but ask, Are there any more fried glutinous rice ball with sesame? Go and buy some for me to taste. They have been sold out long ago. The advisor smiled bitterly and said, I just wanted to buy some, but I didn't expect that the fried glutinous rice ball with sesame was sold at 300 copper coins. Even so, there were still a lot of people buying it. Some people even bought it from others at a high price. Li Shanbao was surprised and said, Is there such a thing? It's somewhat similar to the Zongzi incident in the restaurant of Shicheng last time. Go and find out where the old woman came from. Yes, sir. The advisor immediately hurried to do it. Such a scene not only happened in the district headquarters, but also in the Zhu family and the Yang family. When they found out the origin of the old woman, they were all dumbfounded. It turned out to be a snack made by a miss of the Su family. Something is wrong. The Zongzi and Shicheng last time also came from the Su family. Li Shanbao immediately noticed something wrong and called his nephew Li Wei. After a while, Li Wei stepped into the house with a round belly full of sweat. He said, "Uncle, why did you call me here in such a hurry?" "Wei, let me ask you. Who developed the recipe of the zongzi taken from the Su family last time?" Li Wei smiled bitterly and said, "I don't know. The housekeeper of the Su family is also smart. He didn't mention it. However, it must be a very experienced chef who can come up with such a recipe. Otherwise, it is impossible to think of using ruo leaves, which has never been used in cooking." "Wrong. You are so wrong." Li Shanbao snorted and said, "If I am not wrong, the person who invented the recipe is Su Huanli's daughter, Su Zipei." After Su Li was driven out of the Su family, the news that she returned did not spread out. So, everyone now thought that Su Huanli only had a daughter, Su Zipei. "What?" Li Wei was shocked and said, "That's terrible. I heard that the Yang family has gone to the Su family to propose marriage. Have they got the news? We must stop the Yang family." When it came to the Yang family, Li Shanbao clenched the chair and said, "The little bastard of the Yang family is so bold. I kindly recommended him to the provincial town. As soon as he came back, he gave me an ultimatum and forced me to give up the property of the Baiwei building. He thinks that I don't dare to hurt him because he has a relationship with the son of satrap Yan." Li Wei didn't have the courage of Li Shanbao. He said with a worried face, "Uncle, I heard that the son of satrap Yan is a playboy. We should not provoke him for the time being. Of course, we can't have a head-on conflict. I have lived for so many years. How can I not know this?" Chapter 29. That's a good idea. Let's see the three families fight each other. Uncle is really wise. Li Wei excitedly flattered and immediately went to make arrangements. Under Li Wei's deliberate promotion, the news about the Su family's culinary genius spread like wildfire. For a moment, the Yang, Zhu, and Su families all fell into a deathly silence. Who did it? Who spread the news? Su Huanli was furious and relieved at the same time. Fortunately, the outside world knows nothing about area and they put the blame on Zipei. But this matter will be exposed sooner or later. Housekeeper, do you have any countermeasures? Li Yin frowned and analyzed. It's no good for the Zhu family and the Yang family to spread the news. I think it's the county magistrate's desperate action. Now the Zhu family and the Yang family should be more anxious than us. Su Huanli looked serious. It seems that they will pay a visit soon. Master, it's hard to be a two-faced person. Why don't we fish in troubled waters and reap some benefits? Su Huanli's eyes fell on Li Yin as if he knew him again. In his impression, the old butler should not be so smart. Li Yin was slightly shocked and realized that something was wrong. He immediately said, "These words are analyzed by the first madam. It seems that she doesn't want the third miss to marry into the Yang family. It's not her turn to make decisions for the Su family." Su Huanli's face suddenly became ferocious. "You don't need to listen to madam's words in the future. Do you hear me?" "Yes, master." Li Yin lowered his eyebrows and was at peace. The first madam did mention to him that Zipei didn't want to get married, but she was just beating around the bush. She didn't say it directly. However, these were all secondary to the old master. The old master wanted an excuse to punish the madam, and he was only doing a small favor. The next morning, the carriages of the Zhu family and the Yang family almost stopped in front of the gate of the Su house at the same time. The masters of the two families looked at each other. No one said anything first. Instead, they hurried to the main courtyard of the Su family. A large number of guards of the Su family surrounded the main courtyard of the Su house. Except for the maids who sent lunch, even Zhu Yan had no chance to get close. It was not until the evening that the two patriarchs left the Su family with indescribable expressions. Two people of the Yang family stayed. They were Su Huanli's sister Su Yuezhu and her son Yang Wei. Su Yuezhu married into the Yang family in the last generation. "Brother, I haven't returned to my parents' home for a long time. Why don't Wei and I stay for a few days?" There was a kind smile on Su Yuezhu's face. Su Huanli couldn't help but think of Su Yuezhu's coquettish appearance when he was a child. Although he knew Su Yuezhu's purpose, his heart softened and he agreed. There are still empty rooms in the west courtyard. You can choose a guest room to stay in. Thank you, brother. Su Yuezhu called out sweetly. She was only in her early 30s and had maintained her appearance very well. She was not much different from a 20-year-old girl. Thank you, uncle. Yang Wei also saluted from behind. He had a cultured and refined appearance, but his eyes were wandering from time to time, as if he was looking for someone's beautiful figure. Seeing this, Su Huanli's expression was slightly cold and he warned severely, "Nephew Yang Wei, don't go to Jinyuan court again." "Yuezhu, you too." A few days ago, Arya was accidentally injured and just recovered. She needs to rest. Arya? Is she your second daughter? Su Yuezhu was surprised. Why does that little girl live in Jinyuan court? Su Huanli coughed slightly and didn't explain. Su Yuezhu could only leave with her son first. There were many rooms in the west courtyard. They were all cleaned by the maid who was responsible for cleaning. After Su Yuezhu settled down, she immediately began to ask her son about Jinyuan court. "Mother, I have said before that there is a fairy in Su family. But I didn't expect that her name is Arya." When it came to beautiful women, Yang Wei's face became excited. "You are so unpromising. You are so fascinated by a woman." Su Yuezhu scolded, but her tone was not harsh. "If you want to marry her, you can do it at any time. The most important thing for you now is to marry Su Zipei immediately." "I know." When it came to Su Zipei, Yang Wei suddenly lost interest and said dejectedly. Su Yuezhu was speechless for a while. Her son was good at everything, but he was too lascivious. It was nothing. But he delayed the business of the Yang family because of his lasciviousness, which made the Yang family lose the first opportunity to seize the Baiwei building. Thus, it caused the embarrassing situation of the three families. Li Shanbao sent all the cooks in the Desu town back to their hometown. There were many helpers in the restaurant, but no one could be a chef. Su Zipei who could cook became the only savior. It could be said that whoever got Su Zipei could get the biggest profit from the Baiwei building. Xiaowei, a man should focus on his career. A man must prioritize his career. If you become a high-ranking official, what woman can't you marry? Su Yuezhu couldn't help but persuade him, "If you marry Su Zipei, the entire Baiwei building will be yours. The Su family will be obedient to you." Can Su Arya run away? Yes. Yang Wei seemed to wake up from a dream and suddenly realized. He held Su Yuezhu's hand tightly and said, "Mother, I've figured it out. After I marry Su Zipei, I will cheat her of all her recipes, divorce her, and then marry Arya as my first wife." Yang Wei said as he excitedly went to find Su Zipei. Su Yuezhu was stunned. How could her son be so obsessed with Su Arya? In her impression, Arya was just an ugly and thin black girl. No matter how she changed in these years, she would not become a fairy, right? But she didn't say much. It was not easy for her son to take the initiative to pursue Su Zipei. It was better not to dispel his enthusiasm. It was not long before Yang Wei returned to the guest room angrily. "Mother, I didn't see Zipei. First aunt stopped me from going in. She said that Zipei was learning embroidery and it was not appropriate to disturb her." Su Yuezhu, who was taking a nap on the bed, opened her eyes. The maid who was massaging Su Yuezhu immediately got up and went out to close the door slowly. I forgot that my brother married Zhu Yan. The Zhu family is Su Zipei's grandmother's family. The situation is very unfavorable for our Yang family. Thinking of this, Su Yuezhu frowned. A daughter was close to her mother. In this way, Su Zipei would be more inclined to her mother. Even if Wei succeeded, the Yang family would still be in a weak position. No wonder when my husband gave me the task, he looked gloomy. Presumably, he didn't have much hope. Under these circumstances, it's impossible for Wei to marry Su Zipei. Su Yuezhu felt cold in her heart. But on second thought, it was also an opportunity for her to make a name for herself in the Yang family. If my brother could give more benefits to the Yang family for the sake of the old affection, I would definitely take the initiative. Su Yuezhu's eyes became brighter and brighter. She immediately went out to find Su Huanli. She completely forgot that her son who came to find her before was not in the room. Outside the Jinyuan court, Yang Wei looked at the heavily guarded place and couldn't help but have a headache. Su Huanli, the old guy, sent so many guards to guard against him. It was outrageous. Lightly coughing twice, Yang Wei put on a dignified appearance and walked over. Unlike last time, this time he was stopped by a cold-faced guard before he could even reach the door. Master ordered that no one is allowed to enter the Jinyuan court during this time, especially you, Master Yang. Yang Wei suddenly became angry and said, "How dare you? I am the first young master of the Yang family. Your master is my uncle and my mother is his sister. How can he restrict me? You servants, let me in quickly." The guards still didn't change their expressions, like the smelly and hard stones in the latrine pit. They didn't listen to Yang Wei at all. Yang Wei was so angry that he almost wanted to break in by force. But when he thought of the martial arts he learned, he couldn't get any advantage in front of so many guards. It would be bad if he lost his face in front of the fairy. Humph. Just you wait. Yang Wei threw down a ruthless sentence and left with his tail between his legs. Mammy Li, who peeped in the courtyard, laughed. Mrs. Appearance is really unparalleled in the world. Master Yang just saw her once, but he became so obsessed with her. Sitting on the rattan chair, Su Li took a sip of scented tea and shook her head with a smile. It's not a good thing. Cousin Yang is a lustful person. I remember that he and third sister promised to marry each other privately. Now he abandoned her. Really? Mammy Li was surprised to hear such a secret for the first time. I also heard it from the two of them at the Three Harmonies Bridge. Su Li blinked, put down the scroll, stood up and stretched. I am rusty in the Jinyuan court all day long. I heard from the butler that it's very chaotic recently. Master doesn't let you go out, of course, he is protecting you. Mammy Li picked up the cold teapot and said with approval, I also feel that it's unusual recently. I'm nervous everywhere. Miss, look at the large group of guards outside the Jinyuan court. Even I have to be searched every time I go in and out. I know. I won't run around. Su Li squinted her eyes with a smile, which made people unable to see the light in her eyes. That night, a black light flashed over the Jinyuan court. Su Li, who wore a black mask, quietly bypassed Li Yin's residence and went straight to Su Zipei's residence in the west courtyard. At this moment, there was a man in black standing in front of Su Zipei's window. The dagger in his hand reflected a cold light. In the next moment, the man in black had a ferocious look in his eyes as he fiercely stabbed at Su Zipei's chest. Suddenly, a slender figure shrouded in shadows suddenly appeared and knocked on the wrist of the black figure. The black figure only felt a huge force from his wrist, which almost broke his whole arm. He could no longer hold the dagger. Clang, it fell on the green tiles and made a harsh sound. Su Zipei was awakened and saw two men in black in front of the window. She was so frightened that her scream almost broke her throat and echoed over the Su house. Oh no! The man in black had no time to pick up the dagger and turned over to go out of the window. Su Li tilted her head and smiled at Su Zipei. Then she disappeared like a phantom. Chapter 30. Outside the door of Su Li's room in the Jinyuan court, Mammy Li was frightened. She kept knocking on the door and shouted, "Miss, are you there? Miss, don't scare me. Let me do it." The old butler looked serious and hurried over. When he was about to kick the door open, the door suddenly opened. Su Li, who wore a thin lining, came out and said with a confused look, "Mammy Li, Grandpa Butler. Why did you knock on the door so late? I slept too deeply and didn't hear it." Mammy Li was relieved and patted her chest. "You scared me. Miss, you don't know that an assassin came to the Su house just now. The third miss was almost killed." "Ah." Su Li's almond-shaped eyes widened with horror. Li Yin still looked serious. He went into the room alone and checked carefully. Then he was a little relieved. There was no trace of anyone coming in the room. It seemed that the assassin's target was the third Mississippi. "Butler, the Lord asks you to go to the main courtyard for a discussion." At this time, a guard passed the message from outside the door. Li Yin nodded slightly and didn't forget to tell, "Double the guards of the Jinyuan court. Don't relax your vigilance during the day." "Yes." After Li Yin left, the Jinyuan court returned to peace. Mammy Li didn't dare to let Su Li sleep alone. She took the quilt on her bed and directly made a bed next to Su Li's bed. Su Li lay flat on the bed, and her black hair was like a waterfall on the bed. Mammy Li's even and deep breath came in the dark. Su Li smiled. Sure enough, someone couldn't wait to kill the cooking genius. But if Su Zipei died in vain, it would ruin her interest of rebirth. At night, the main courtyard held a discussion. Everyone was tense. After a full hour of discussion, everyone went back to rest. Su Huanli only felt extremely tired. On the way back to the house, he could only fight with his eyelids. He negotiated with the Zhu family and the Yang family for most of the day. At night, such a thing happened, which really made him restless. Suddenly, he heard a very low voice of conversation. He felt it was very familiar. He couldn't help but quietly lean towards the direction of the voice. Since I can't marry Su Zipei, no one can marry her. Useless. You can't even kill a woman. How dare you say you are a stranger in Jianghu? How infuriating. The voice gradually faded away. Su Huanli was shocked and angry, but he didn't dare to go out and have a look. If the killer was still there, wouldn't he be courting death if he stood out? When the voice completely disappeared, Su Huanli stood up and looked at the direction where the voice left. It was the west courtyard. He was no longer sleepy and only felt a chill from the bottom of his feet to the top of his head. How could his nephew be so vicious? Was this his idea or the Yang family's? Su Huanli leaves absent-mindedly, but he doesn't find that the black shell in the grass is slowly moving to the west courtyard. Early in the morning, Su Li woke up and touched the pillow. Suddenly, she felt a smooth shell-like object. She grabbed it with one hand and opened her eyes. The object in her hand was the sound acquaintance, goo. It really is a spirit goo. It can find its own master. Su Li praised him secretly. After she stopped the killer last night, she made some arrangements and threw the poisonous insect on the way that Su Huanli must pass on his way back to rest. If she could successfully frame the Yang family, it would naturally be the best. Even if she failed, there would be no harm to her. "Miss, important news." As soon as she got dressed, Mammy Li rushed in from outside and said, "I don't know what's wrong with the Lord. He believes that the killer was sent by the Yang family. Today, Master Yang and old Miss Su are almost driven out of the Su house." Su Li was not surprised or happy in her heart, but she pretended to be surprised and said, "Cousin Yang's family should be so vicious? It's terrible." "Yes." Mammy Li was scared. Thinking that she wanted to greet the two people yesterday, she couldn't help but have goosebumps. At this moment, at the gate of the Su house, Su Yuezhu was so anxious that she burst into tears. She grabbed Su Huanli and said, "Brother, what are you doing? How could the killer be sent by Wei? He is your nephew." "Yes, uncle. Even if I am a bastard, I will not do such a vicious thing," Yang Wei explained anxiously. Su Huanli sneered and said, "If you don't want others to know, don't do it. I heard what you said last night clearly. Now it's useless to say anything. The business of the Baiwei building is no longer under the control of the Yang family. The Yang family can't get half of the profits." Yang Wei was stunned. What did he do last night? Didn't he talk to his mother? What did he say? Was it sleep talking? Su Yuezhu, you are so cruel that you even hurt your brother. You'd better go back to the Yang family. You don't have to go back to the Su family. Su Huanli said a cruel word and left. Su Yuezhu was stunned in the wind. At this moment, in the county mansion, Li Shanbao looked at the man in black who bowed his head in front of him with a gloomy expression. The man looked honest, but he did murder and arson. You said that someone stopped you, or a senior. After the silence, Li Shanbao finally opened his mouth. The man in black suddenly relaxed his body and explained in a low voice, "He just tapped my wrist gently, and my whole arm was numb. The strength was absolutely not that of an ordinary person. He must be a stranger in Jianghu who practiced Xiangong. Fortunately, I just threw an ordinary steel dagger there, and it won't be recognized. I didn't expect that there was a senior in the Su family." Li Shanbao frowned and said nothing. Of course, he was not willing to let the Baiwei building make a comeback under the Su family. The best way was to kill Su Zipei. However, he didn't expect that he went for wool and came home shorn. He was almost exposed. "I can't let you out of prison directly because you haven't done it. But considering that you also took the risk this time, I will reduce your sentence by half. What do you think?" Li Shanbao said the reward. The man in black was slightly happy. He clasped his hands and said, "Thank you, magistrate. I will go back to prison first." "Go ahead." Li Shanbao waved his hand. After the man in black left, he couldn't help but sneer, "What a powerful stranger in Jianghu. Even a killer as strong as you, Black Star, is at my disposal in prison." Under the guidance of the jailer, the man in black returned to the dirty and smelly dungeon. The smile on his face had completely disappeared, leaving only pure calmness. "If it weren't for the child, I would not bother to deal with such a scum. But this time, I got some news. The zongzi invented by the child actually appeared in the Desu town. I can't go out in a short time." "Well, it's not urgent. I will report to the child after I get out of prison." 3 days later, the Su family, the Zhu family and the Yang family gathered together again. Su Li could hear the quarrel from the main courtyard far away in the Jinyuan court. When the sun went down, Su Huanli sent the Zhu family and the Yang family away with a smile. It seemed that the profit distribution of the Baiwei building had been settled. The storm subsided so quickly. The three families let bygones be bygones and cooperated again. Su Li was not surprised at all. The Baiwei building had been completely closed. Time waited for no one. If it was closed for a long time, the customers would be seriously lost and all their efforts would be in vain. At dinner time, Su Huanli specially asked Su Li to have dinner together. Su Li was very surprised that she didn't see Zhu Yan. It was the first time that Su Li became more beautiful. Su Huanli couldn't help but swallow his saliva secretly. He hadn't seen this girl for a few days. How could her appearance become so enchanting? He felt thirsty after looking at her for a long time. "Area, I have recently discussed with the Zhu family and the Yang family. The Baiwei building will be a cooperation among the three families. Each of us will take 30% of the profit. The remaining 10% depends on you. Suli looked up in surprise and pretended to be confused. Daddy, I have heard that the Byway building is closed. But how can the profit distribution be related to me? Su Huanli smiled and touched Suli's head. He explained, now the Byway building still needs a main dish that can carry the banner. The last 10% of the profit will belong to the one who develops it first. Arya, do you understand? Suli suddenly realized and said, I understand. I will go back to study the dish and won't let you down. Su Huanli immediately laughed and said, good girl, although it is urgent, don't be too tired and hurt your health. I see, Daddy. Suli nodded obediently. She was not surprised by such an ending. The last 10% was obviously given to the Su family by the other two families. Because the Su family didn't have the ability to provide the main dish. The other two families were also afraid that the Su family would take the benefits but not make efforts. Su Huanli and them should have other agreements. For example, if the Su family couldn't provide the main dish, what should they do and so on. Suli had already prepared the main dish, but she was not ready to take it out too early. Therefore, after returning to the Jinyuan court, although she walked around the kitchen every day, there was no progress. Su Huanli suddenly became anxious and came to ask. Suli looked bitter and sighed, Daddy, I also want to take out a delicious main dish, but I haven't found a lot of ingredients. I can't cook without rice. What materials? Arya, tell me earlier. I will find them for you. Su Huanli said without thinking. Suli immediately gave him the prepared atlas. Su Huanli was so anxious that he didn't think much. He immediately sent people into the mountain to look for it. He even mobilized the other two families to look for it together. Suli sat in the courtyard and smiled with one hand supporting her chin. It would be a waste if she didn't make use of so many free laborers. With the help of the three families, the progress of collecting medicinal materials would definitely be a big step forward. In the afternoon, Su Huanli led a group of servants who carried various plants to the Jinyuan court. After ordering people to pile all the plants in the courtyard, Su Huanli's expression turned from anxiety to worry. He couldn't help but say, Arya, can these wildflowers and vegetables really be used as seasonings? I see that many plants are colorful and ferocious. I am afraid that they are poisonous. Suli squatted down to check the poisonous grass and comforted him, Daddy, don't worry. During the days when I was driven out of the family, I lived on the wild fruits in the mountain. I have tasted many of them. Although I am not sure about the rest, I can also test them with silver needles. That's good. Su Huanli was slightly relieved and immediately stunned. He asked in a trembling voice, Arya, what did you say? Didn't your mother arrange you to go to your distant uncle's house at that time? Suli was at a loss. Distant uncle. Do I have any distant relatives? I almost starved to death outside. It was my eldest brother who saved me home. Chapter 31. I'm confused. Madam is so cruel that she left Arya outside. Alas. How can I face Arya in the future? Su Huanli walked back and forth in the house and thought about the plan. If Arya is resentful, the last 10% profit of the Byway building will be lost. No, even if I can't punish Madam and Zipe, I have to give Arya enough compensation. In the Jinyuan court, Suli was squatting on the ground to separate the ingredients and poisonous weeds. Just in case, she only mixed a small number of poisonous weeds in the atlas and did not completely list the medicinal materials in the Book of Poison. But even so, with these poisonous weeds, she could refine a lot of gadgets. As for Su Huanli, she didn't have so much leisure to care about him. Making him uneasy was just a convenience. If she could take advantage of this to gain a greater advantage, it would be an unexpected joy. Miss, I'm back. A familiar voice came from outside. Suli looked up and saw Mammy Li hesitantly walking in with a basket and a few newly picked lotus leaves in her hand. Miss, the lotus leaves are in full bloom in summer. This servant found it almost effortlessly, but this yellow mud. Mammy Lee opened the basket and revealed the wet yellow mud. She looked strange and said, "The yellow mud is so dirty. Can it really be used to cook?" Su Lee smiled slightly and didn't answer. She just ordered, "Mammy, don't let the mud dry. It's not sticky. The lotus leaves should be washed very clean. I'm almost ready. Now go to the town to find a fat and delicate hen with yellow mouth, yellow feet, yellow hair, small head and big body." Alas! I'm going now. Mammy Lee quickly dealt with the lotus leaves and the yellow mud. She wiped her hands and went out. Then she saw the old butler waiting outside the Jinyuan court. "Mammy Lee, if second miss needs anything, just tell us. The more guards, the more powerful we are. It's convenient to find anything." Mammy Lee was surprised and said, "That's great. I was worried about how to find such a strange hen." Hen. Butler Lee was happy when he heard it. Second miss was going to make the main dish. With the instruction of Mammy Lee, the whole Su family immediately started to work. At the same time, the other two families also got the news. Hen, Su Lee has developed a new dish in just a few days. If it was an ordinary woman, she would still be in shock from the assassination attempt. When Yang Li received the news, his heart was filled with doubts. "That's right, father. I heard that Su Zipei's nanny went to pick the lotus leaves and dig the yellow mud. No one knows what kind of dish Su Zipei is going to make." Yang Wei immediately added. "He made a big mistake in the Baiwei building. If he didn't remedy it, he wouldn't be the head of the Yang family, let alone marry Su area. Humph. When the dishes come out, they must be approved by the Yang family and the Zhu family. Otherwise, Su Huanli will not get a penny of the last 10% profit." As Yang Li spoke, he looked at his eldest son's cowardly appearance and was immediately angered. He turned hostile and scolded, "You incompetent thing. If you weren't greedy for beauty, how could the Baiwei building let them intervene? Get out of here and reflect on yourself." Yang Wei was extremely afraid of his father. After being yelled at like this, he immediately retreated in fear. Sitting in the empty central room, Yang Li suddenly sneered, "She wants to cook with yellow mud? She is a silly girl who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. She really thinks that she is a genius. It's impossible to cook with yellow mud." The same voice sounded in the Zhu family. Butler Zhu firmly said, "Master, although Miss Su used hens, if she added yellow mud to the chicken, who would want to eat it? I'm afraid that even beggars will feel disgusted. Yellow mud is the biggest failure of this dish. In the tasting and appraisal a few days later, the Su family will definitely lose. The remaining 10% profit depends on how you negotiate with the Yang family." Ho ho, Su Huanli is too irrational to bet all his treasures on his daughter. How old is the little girl? After succeeding twice by luck, I'm afraid that she has long forgotten who she is. Zhu Rongkuan seemed to have the pearl of wisdom in his hands. The Yang family is also nothing to worry about. They rashly sent killers before, which is not in line with morality. Our Zhu family can get at least 70% of the last 10% profit. Master is wise. After Su Zipei fails, the cook you invited from the county town should arrive. At that time, maybe you can squeeze profits from the other two families." Ha ha ha, the laughter of the master and the servant rang in the central room. Su Huanli also panicked when he heard that Su Li wanted to cook with yellow mud. Did Arya really hate him in her heart and deliberately want him to fail? Thinking that he was about to lose the shining silver, Su Huanli was very distressed. He didn't care about the guilt in his heart and immediately rushed to the Jinyuan court. At this moment, the sun was scorching. The ground of the Jinyuan court was covered with all kinds of medicine boards. Under the direct sunlight, there was a slight sound from time to time, so that the whole yard was full of mixed fragrance. Seeing this scene, Su Huanli was a little relieved. At least, Arya made good use of the ingredients that he ordered people to find instead of discarding them at will. Under the shade covered by vines, Suli was holding a book and studying it carefully. Although the practice of the fourth hurdle of the Ghost Valley meditation direction was smooth recently, there were many insights that could not be digested. Therefore, she could only suspend the practice and digest the inspiration by reading. "Daddy, why are you here?" Seeing Su Huanli coming, Suli got up and looked surprised. Su Huanli breathed out the turbid air and sat at the stone table. He said in a deep voice, "Arya, tell me the truth. Are you sure about the new dish?" Suli pursed her lips and said nothing. Seeing that she really fell into silence, Su Huanli suddenly felt nervous and said quickly, "Arya, if you still have resentment because I drove you out of the family before, I will give you whatever you want. But we can't make mistakes on the new dish, which is related to the future of the Su family. If we can really run the Byway building, we will have enough strength to support your eldest brother to go further in his official career. Arya, you must not be confused. Daddy, you misunderstood me." Suli hurriedly waved her hand as if she was scared by Su Huanli's tone. She said, "My eldest brother told me about the previous things. Now the misunderstanding has been explained clearly. I was also saved by my eldest brother. As a daughter of the Su family, how can I bear a grudge? It's just that the dish I want to make can't be made without qualified hens. So, I didn't say anything. It turns out that you are worried that you can't find the right ingredients." Su Huanli was shocked for a moment and suddenly realized that his daughter was still worried about the Su family. He was really worrying for nothing. "Arya, you really scared me. It's just ingredients. I will find them for you even if I turn over all the chicken houses in the Desu town. Don't worry. I will send more people now." Su Huanli came worriedly and left excitedly, which surprised many guards. Butler Li saw it and couldn't help but smile. The master was still so suspicious that he still refused to fully believe Arya at this time. But, could Arya really let go of the former hatred and concentrate on working for the Su family? Butler Li, who was well informed, thought that he had seen the nature of Su Arya, but he still had a big question mark in his heart. Because people would change. For several days, the Su family, the Zhu family and the Yang family were running around for the 3 yellow chicken. But they searched the whole Desu town and didn't find any. Is Su Huanli deliberately embarrassing us? If he can't find the 3 yellow chicken, he can find an excuse even if he can't make the most famous dish? Yang Li couldn't help guessing. He immediately made up his mind and ordered, "Keep looking. If we can't find it in the Desu town, we will go to the county city. If we can't find it in the county city, Su Huanli must be playing tricks on us. At that time, I will cooperate with Zhu Rongkuan to ask him for an explanation." At this time, a servant suddenly rushed in from outside and reported, "Master, the 3 yellow chicken is found." Yang Li's eyes widened. There was really such a hen. In the Jinyuan court, Mammy Li held a clucking hen and said excitedly, "Miss, I found it. Look at its yellow mouth, yellow feet, yellow hair, small head and big body. It's exactly the same as what you said. Arya, what do you think of this chicken?" Su Huanli's eyes were bloodshot. Obviously, he didn't sleep for several nights because of looking for the hen. Su Li touched the smooth and shiny feathers of the 3 yellow chicken. After looking at it for a moment, she nodded and said, "Yes. This is the 3 yellow chicken I want. Mammy Li, come with me to deal with the ingredients." Then, Su Li turned to look at Su Huanli and said with concern, "Daddy, you must be very tired these days. Why don't you take a rest while I cook? When I am done, I will ask Mammy Li to wake you up. What do you think?" Su Huanli showed a gratified smile and said, "Arya knows how to love me. Good. I will go to have a rest now." When Su Huanli left the Jinyuan court, he was a little unsteady. If he stayed for a few days, he might get seriously ill. In the kitchen, Su Li picked up the knife with fear. After a while, she couldn't do it. Mammy Lee looked at her and laughed. She forgot that the miss had never killed a living creature since childhood. Miss, let me do it. What do you say? I will do it. Mammy Lee couldn't help but say. Su Lee sighed with a pale face and handed the knife to Mammy Lee. She said dispiritedly, well, Mammy Lee, you must be careful. Don't make mistakes. Okay. According to Su Lee's order, Mammy Lee killed the hen quickly and removed its feathers. Then she opened a small hole in the back door of the hen to remove the viscera and wash it. Then she put the white and clean hen in front of Su Lee. After checking, Su Lee said in a gentle voice, Mammy, I have just ground the seasoning on the table in the study. Go and get it. Mammy Lee didn't doubt her and ran out of the kitchen. Su Lee's eyes flashed. She immediately picked up the kitchen knife and quickly broke the hen's wings, leg bones and shin bones with the back of the knife. The hen's skin was not damaged. Miss, is it this one? At this time, Mammy Lee came back with a white porcelain bottle. Su Lee took it with a smile and put it aside. Yes, it is this one. Chapter 32. Mammy, where is the small jar I asked you to wash the day before yesterday? Su Lee's voice interrupted her thinking. Mammy Lee immediately came to her senses and bent down to take the jar from under the stove and put it on the table. Mammy, thank you. The jar is just the right size. Su Lee praised and put the whole chicken in it. Then she poured soy sauce, yellow wine and salt into the jar and sealed it. She turned around and found a piece of white cloth to put it. Mammy, the chicken needs to be marinated for an hour. Watch it carefully. I will read for a while and come back. Su Lee told her to leave. Mammy Lee hurriedly agreed and recalled nervously while counting her fingers. How long had passed just now? While counting the time, she moved the hourglass and waited. This was a big event related to the restaurant of the Su family. She didn't expect that the second miss would entrust it to her. I can't let the miss down. An hour, an hour. Mammy Lee stared at the clock. She almost counted the seconds in an hour, tick. An hour later, Mammy Lee cheered up and immediately got up and shouted, Miss, an hour is up. After a short while, Su Lee yawned and came over. She smiled and said, Don't worry, Mammy. An hour is just a general time. It doesn't matter if you marinate for a while. I am afraid that you will be delayed. The old master values you so much. You can't make mistakes. Mammy Lee felt wronged. Su Lee's face glowed with a warm light. She smiled coquettishly and said, Mammy, you are the best. Mammy Lee blushed and spat, You are such a naughty girl. Go to cook quickly. Yes, yes, yes. Su Lee lifted the wooden lid of the jar and became more and more serious. She carefully took out the whole chicken and stuffed the stuffing of chopped green onion, ginger, lean pork, and diced shiitake mushrooms that were fried in lard a few days ago into the belly of the whole chicken. Then she opened the small porcelain bottle and spread the ground cloves and anise powder evenly on the chicken. This series of dazzling operations couldn't help but make Mammy Lee stunned. It was just a small chicken, but there were so many crafts. The complexity was comparable to that of palace dishes. How did Miss come up with it? Nanny, come and help tie the rope. When Mammy Lee came to her senses, she saw that the whole chicken had been wrapped tightly by lotus leaves. She immediately went to tie a strong knot at the end of the rope. After finishing this step, Su Lee wrapped 2 more layers of lotus leaves, and then brought out the yellow mud she had dug before. Nanny, help me smear the yellow mud on the wet white cloth. The thickness must be uniform. As Su Lee said, she smeared some of the yellow mud first, and Mammy Lee immediately followed. With the two of them working together, it didn't take them long to paint the white cloth all over. Finally, Su Lee put the chicken wrapped in lotus leaves in the middle of the white cloth. She lifted the 4 corners of the white cloth and wrapped the chicken tightly to make the yellow mud stick. Then she removed the wet cloth and fixed it with an iron frame. Finally, she put it on the charcoal fire to roast. So this is why Miss wanted me to light a fire these few days. Mammy Lee was suddenly enlightened. At the same time, she couldn't help but marvel that there was such a way of barbecuing meat. She had never heard of it. Su Lee's expression was very focused. She turned the iron frame every half an hour, and the time was so accurate that no machine was needed to measure it. Although she was a heinous devil in the previous life, her attainments in food were so profound that even the imperial kitchen could not compare with her. Because her husband said, "In this world, only a wife and delicious food can't be disappointed." Therefore, even if she lost everything and was full of revenge and destruction, she would not forget to help her husband collect local specialties and delicacies. Those recipes engraved in her soul reminded her every moment that she was not without anything. At least her husband's hope was still there. 4 hours later, Su Lee put down the iron frame expressionlessly, removed the charcoal brazier, and picked up the beggar's chicken that had been roasted into a hard ball with her bare hands and put it on the plate. "Mammy." Hearing the sound, Mammy Lee, who was dozing off, suddenly woke up. "Miss, I am here." Mammy Lee's eyes moved to the big mud ball on the table, and she suddenly felt strange. After working for so long, she made such an ugly thing. "Mammy." Su Lee's cold tone became gentle. "Go and call my father." Su Huanli, who had slept for 3 hours, was hungry. When he heard Mammy Lee's voice, he immediately rushed to the room. Seeing the big mud ball on the table in Su Lee's room, his eyes almost popped out. "Is this the new dish you made?" "It's nonsense. Even if the old hen is used to make soup, it will be much more delicious than the one you made with mud." Su Huanli scolded so much that his saliva sprayed out, and he felt that the sky was falling. It seemed that he had seen the arrogance of the Zhu family and the Yang family laughing at him. "Daddy, don't be impatient." Su Li smiled and gently knocked on the surface of the yellow mud with a small hammer. Crack, the mud ball cracked a gap, and the warm and unrestrained smell came out. For a time, the room was full of fragrance. Even the guards outside the house couldn't help but swallow their saliva, and their eyes fluttered to the room crazily. Su Huanli had long forgotten the previous abuse, and stared at the small mud ball that cracked in half in front of him with the eyes of seeing his lover. Su Li continued to knock. After all the yellow mud shell was knocked open, the hot smell came, mixed with the intoxicating rich fragrance. This kind of fragrance was more irresistible than zongzi. Su Huanli even thought that the yellow mud might be delicious. Su Li didn't seem to see Su Huanli's reaction. She slowly untied the cotton rope and opened the lotus leaf. The main character finally appeared in front of Su Huanli. The chicken skin was golden and bright, as if it was cast by gold. It was really a feast for the eyes. The temperature in the lotus leaf was very high. After Su Li untied it, the hot steam mixed with white smoke slowly dissipated with Jinyuan Court as the center. Soon, the whole Su house could smell the fragrance. "What's the smell?" Zhu Yan sniffed hard, and her saliva surged wildly. The dinner in front of her was instantly as difficult to swallow as chaff. "Mom, it smells so good. I want to eat it. Who is cooking delicious food?" Su Zipei sniffed hard, and almost closed her eyes to drift away with the fragrance. At this moment, in Jinyuan Court, Su Huanli's mouth was already full of oil, and he didn't even bother to say a word. When the chicken entered his mouth, the taste buds exploded. The crisp, fat, tender, and original taste almost made Su Huanli go to heaven. There is such delicious food in the world. It's really delicious. Su Huanli's eyes were wet and blurred. He even cried because of eating, but his hands didn't stop. He still kept stuffing the chicken into his mouth. In less than a quarter of an hour, there were only lotus leaves and mud on the plate. Su Huanli burped contentedly. The whole chicken was eaten up by him alone. "Daddy, you eat too much." You should go to the courtyard to digest. Su Li reminded him with a smile. Su Huanli woke up from a dream and remembered the purpose of coming here. But the whole chicken had been eaten up by him. How could he give it to the Yang family and the Zhu family? Su Huanli blushed and patted his head. It seemed that he had to find the 3 yellow chicken. It was indispensable to supply the restaurant in the future. This was really a happy trouble. Arya, you did a good job. This dish is absolutely worthy of being the signature dish of the Baiwei building. Su Huanli praised, but he was shouting excitedly in his heart. It was more than worthy. It was almost 10,000 times more delicious than the previous signature dish of the Baiwei building. The Baiwei building might become the first restaurant in the world with Arya's cooking skills. At that time, he would become the richest man in the world. He could even enter the palace to meet the emperor and get a golden plaque. Thinking about it, Su Huanli almost laughed out. After a while, he woke up from the daydream and coughed twice. His voice was more gentle. Arya, I will send another 3 yellow chicken in a few days. It will be sent to the Zhu family and the Yang family for evaluation. Once it is done, you will be the biggest hero of the Su family. Su Li bowed slightly and said modestly, I dare not ask for credit. But I will follow your arrangement. Good. You are really my good daughter. Haha. Su Huanli laughed and walked away with a sense of elation. After I offer this dish, who dares to say that I, Su Huanli, am dim-sighted and impulsive? After Su Huanli left, Mammy Li, who was waiting outside the door, immediately came in to clean up. She asked while cleaning, Miss, how is the new dish? Su Li shook her head helplessly and said, Daddy ate it all alone. I also want to know what it tastes like. Ah. Mammy Li's eyes widened. It was such a big chicken. Was the Lord not afraid of eating too much? But, she also wanted to eat it. Just the smell alone was enough to make one unable to stop. Well, Mammy, hurry up to cook. I haven't eaten anything for a long time. Su Li reminded Mammy Li. She clapped her hands and said, Ah. Miss, you must be very hungry. The Lord doesn't leave anything for you. I am going to cook now. Su Li nodded gently and looked into the distance. The selfish nature of Su Huanli, the old guy, had not changed at all. With the experience of looking for the 3 yellow chicken last time, the second 3 yellow chicken was sent to Su Li in less than 2 days. After spending half a day to roast it, Su Huanli came to take it away on time and left the Su house by carriage. Miss, I just saw the 3rd miss in the carriage. After Su Huanli left, Mammy Li came over and said mysteriously. Su Li smiled and said, Mammy, are you doubting Daddy? The 3rd sister was almost killed by a villain. Now Daddy takes the 3rd sister with him to protect me. But the 3rd sister has to bear the risk. It turns out that you have long known the rumors outside. Mammy Li was surprised and said, Why didn't I think of this? I thought the Lord would give all the benefits to the 3rd Mississippi. The servants are talking about it. I am not deaf. Su Li smiled lightly and turned back to the room. On the official road, the carriage creaked all the way. Su Zipei held the beggar's chicken, which was still a little warm on the surface, and lowered her head. The jealousy and hatred in her eyes almost burned out her reason. She couldn't wait to throw the thing in her hand out now. Chapter 33. Pei, you must not expose yourself. Otherwise, you will lose the last function. Your father may immediately marry you. If you can pretend to be Su Arya and stand in front of outsiders, you don't have to worry about marriage. Su Zipei heard her mother's words and she came back to her senses. At this time, Su Huanli said, Zipei, you made so many mistakes before. I didn't blame you. This time, you must perform well in front of the Zhu and Yang families. Don't weaken the reputation of our Su family. Seeing that her father's tone was gentle, Su Zipei felt a little better. She nodded obediently and said, "Dad, don't worry. I will be careful." Seeing that, Su Huanli's eyes were more gentle. Children always grew up. After experiencing so many things, Zipei finally knew to think for her family. Your second sister's talent is peerless, she's a rare genius. She may become a superior female chef in the future. You can't compare with her. But recently, the Desu town is not very safe. You have to protect your second sister and don't let her get hurt on behalf of her. You are biological sisters. Your second sister remembers your kindness. In the future, it is very likely that you will marry into an official's family and become the wife of an official. Su Huanli tirelessly taught her, but he didn't find that Su Zipei lowered her head and her face was distorted after hearing these words. I am just a substitute for Su area. Are you kidding me? Are we biological sisters? She is a bastard picked up by my mother. Why is she superior and I can't compare with her? I am a human. Not a mask. Su Zipei almost roared out the origin of Su area. But this sentence lingered in her heart and was abruptly interrupted by Su Huanli. Zipei, are you listening? Su Huanli's voice was slightly stern, and his tone was higher. Su Zipei was shocked and broke into a cold sweat instantly. She said softly, Yes, Dad. I understand. Well, that's good. Su Huanli put away his majesty and rewarded her with money. That was the end of the warning. The Baiwei building, which was agreed with the Zhu and Yang families, was not far away. On this day, the entire Desu town market smelled the aroma from the Baiwei building. Rumors gradually spread among ordinary people that the Baiwei building was closed to study the treasures of the Baiwei building. Now the new dishes were ready and the Baiwei building was going to reopen. At noon that day, Zhu Rongkuan and Yang Li left with bruised and swollen faces. Some people were curious as to why the two patriarchs fought, but they were told that it was because of a dish. Su Zipei collapsed on the ground and looked at the messy room. Dry yellow mud was scattered everywhere, and waves of extremely tempting fragrance lingered in the air, making her salivate. So the aroma I smelled the other day was second sister's new dish. Today, her performance was extremely poor and she almost didn't have the temperament of a genius. But in front of the beggar's chicken, no one paid attention to her. The two masters in the room became hooligans who fought on the street for this dish. Nobody remembered Su Zipei who was kneeling in the corner. Hurry up and stand up. If you continue to perform so poorly in the future, how will you be able to protect your second sister? Su Huanli reprimanded her sternly, but he couldn't stop smiling. Although no one mentioned the profit during the whole process, the last 10% of the profit had already been settled. Su Zipei got up silently and followed Su Huanli back like a wood. She didn't say a word during the whole process. After returning to the wing room of the west courtyard and seeing Zhu Yan, she burst into tears. Zhu Yan hugged Su Zipei distressingly and comforted her softly. After a long time, Su Zipei intermittently explained the whole story. Su Huanli, you even used my daughter as a shield. Zhu Yan gnashed her teeth, and her voice changed because of anger. Her heart, liver, spleen, and lungs were entangled together, and she felt very painful. She vaguely noticed this, but she didn't expect that Su Huanli would hit the nail on the head to tell Zipei. How could Zipei, who had always been arrogant, stand it? Zipei, don't cry. Zhu Yan tightly grasped Su Zipei's weak shoulders, and there seemed to be flames in her eyes. Don't forget that one day you will be successful. What is a female chef? She is just a tool. When you become a princess or a general's wife, she is just a servant who cooks for you. Zhu Yan's comfort was really effective. Su Zipei gradually stopped crying and asked, Mother, what should I do now? A little impatience will spoil great plans. Endure these days. When I find the owner of the jade pendant, we will have good days. Zhu Yan's eyes flashed, you continue to listen to your father. Only in this way can you delay the time and not get married. And if you do this, you will definitely get in touch with the business of the byway building in the future, which is also a practice for you. The flowers in the greenhouse are always useless. The intrigues of the rich and powerful families are even more fierce. I will start to train you now. Well, I will listen to you, mother. Su Zipei rekindled the hope in her heart and even had a trace of joy. Su area, even if you have an extraordinary family background and excellent talent, the final winner can only be me. Let me see when you, a frog at the bottom of the well, can jump for a long time. Su Li, who didn't know the secret of the jade pendant, was obediently pouring tea for Qi Xianqing, who came back in the study. Area, your talent in cooking is really beyond my imagination. When Su Li returned to the Desu town, Qi Xianqing almost got the news at the first time. At this moment, he looked extremely serious and said in a deep voice, "But, the identity of the cook is low. After all, he is immortal. You must remember not to lose sight of the big picture for the small and delay your practice. Only when your cultivation is high can you be detached from the world and control your own destiny. Even the king of a country, you don't need to pay attention to him. But master, it is written in the book that the people in Jianghu can't compare with the imperial court. How can they be detached from the world?" Su Li pretended to ask. Qi Xianqing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The books you read are all controlled by the imperial court. How can they say bad things about themselves? The country is indeed a giant and ordinary people can't insult it. However, those who have practiced to be detached from the world will not be restricted by the imperial court at all. Instead, the imperial court will be afraid of them. Can you guess why? Su Li's eyes were clear and she immediately replied, "I see. It is written in the book that those who have nothing to lose are not afraid of those who wear shoes. The imperial court has many scruples, but the wanderers in Jianghu have no fixed residence and almost have no weaknesses." Qi Xianqing was stunned suddenly. He didn't expect that Su Area, who had never been out of the house, had such sharp eyes and saw the key at once. "You are really smart, so you should also be such a detached person. Look at those who are entangled by the world. Which one of them is not restrained everywhere and trapped by others? Only like your master, you can be free and unrestrained." Su Li was silent for a moment and suddenly asked, "Master, are you practicing the heartless way?" Qi Xianqing's pupils shrank instantly. Su Li said again, "I read in the Ghost Valley meditation direction that if you have no scruples, you must abandon your emotions. That is the heartless way. But I still have my parents and my elder brother and younger brother. How can I abandon them?" After she said this, Su Li didn't get Qi Xianqing's answer for a long time. After a long time, Qi Xianqing smiled bitterly and didn't say anything. He forgot that Area was still a 14-year-old little girl, which was the age when she just stepped into the world of mortals. How could she abandon everything like him who had stepped into the coffin? Our paths are indeed different due to our different encounters. At this moment, Qi Xianqing actually faintly comprehended. If he had the sixth hurdle of the Ghost Valley meditation direction, maybe he could break through immediately and add decades of life. Unfortunately, he didn't. Forget it. As her master, he had already brought Su Li into the sect. At most, he would help her pave a better path. As for how Su Li would practice in the future, let her do it herself. Thinking of this, Qi Xianqing took out a yellowed booklet from his arms. The title was nothing strange. Su Li was slightly shocked when she saw it. She didn't expect that the old guy could get such a high-level disguise skill, which was almost the same as what she practiced in the previous life. Qi Xianqing put the booklet on the table and explained carefully, there are different levels of disguise skills in Jianghu. The lowest level is to change the facial features with herbs to achieve the purpose of disguise. But there are many flaws in this method, and it is easy to be seen through by others. The middle-level method is to refine the disguise elixir with herbs. If you meet someone whose cultivation is lower than your own, it will not be seen through in general. The last one is this thing. Qi Xianqing pointed to the booklet and continued, anyone can practice the secret disguise skill. When it is practiced to a high level, it is impossible to be seen through unless the opponent has the secret pupil method. However, it is difficult to practice the secret disguise skill. Only a few people in Jianghu can reach the level of perfection. This disguise secret skill is called nothing strange. It's one of the better secret skills. Take it and cultivate it quickly to disguise your appearance. Yes, master. Su Li took it and sighed in her heart. It was really different to practice with a master. She was alone in the previous life and suffered a lot. It took her a whole year to make arrangements to get a beyond recognition with many defects. But in this life, it was almost effortless. There are still things to be busy in the Baiqiao Tang. You should practice diligently. Don't be lazy. I will come to check your reading and practice progress tomorrow morning. Do you understand? I see. Take care, master. After explaining the disguise skill, Qi Xianqing got up and left. Su Li hurriedly saw him off. That night, Su Li didn't sleep all night and finished studying Nothing Strange. Compared with Beyond Recognition, Nothing Strange was more practical. The unrecognizable skill could make people ugly and their facial features distorted, almost disabled. The Nothing Unusual skill could make people look like ordinary people. If the practice was successful, even the most handsome person would become ordinary. This disguise skill was undoubtedly tailored for Su Li by Qi Xianqing. There were many similarities between the disguise skill. She just needed to get through some hidden acupoints. Su Li had rich experience and wanted to experiment. But it was already late. She could only go to the school of the East Courtyard with the booklet. In order not to cause trouble, she walked to the East Courtyard with a veil. Qi Xianqing praised her secretly. It was said that human nature was hard to change. Some characters would not change with age. The happier one was in Jianghu, the faster he died. Su Li was cautious and didn't want to cause trouble, which was suitable for her to wander in Jianghu. Although she was kind and simple now, she would naturally improve when she encountered more things in the future. Qi Xianqing had always been very lucky to find such a suitable successor in the last years of his life. After the class, Qi Xianqing checked the progress of Su Li's practice and was very satisfied. It seemed that after half a year, when his apprentice's cultivation reached the third hurdle, he could officially teach her the medical circle. There is not enough time. Chapter 34. Time passed slowly when Su Li was studying Nothing Strange. On this day, the Baiwei building in the Daisu town was decorated with lanterns and streamers. It finally opened again. As soon as the waiter opened the door, a large number of customers who had been waiting outside immediately came in like a tide. With the cooperation of the three families, the entire Baiwei building had been redecorated, and the layout had become different. The most eye-catching thing was the big sign on the side of the counter of the shopkeeper. Beggar's Chicken. Is this the new dish, the treasure of the restaurant? What a strange name. The customers who sat down focused their eyes and talked about it. When someone saw the bottom of the sign, he immediately exclaimed, "Are you kidding me? A plate of beggar's chicken costs 50 taels. Shopkeeper, why don't you rob someone?" This cry immediately attracted other customers to look at it, and then the noise became louder. Everyone cursed at once. What kind of chicken costs 50 taels? I can go to the brothel for more than half a month without so much money. It's simply bullying. Who can afford it? Isn't it taking us as fools to extort money? What a shabby restaurant. Goodbye. In the blink of an eye, half of the customers in the restaurant were gone, and the other half were skeptical. The shopkeeper wiped the cold sweat on his head and quickly stood up to explain, "Everyone, the main ingredients and side ingredients of beggar's chicken are unique. My boss has even opened a chicken farm in order to raise the chicken specially for beggars' chicken. Today, the restaurant is newly opened, and there is a free taste of beggars' chicken. If you have enough time, please wait a moment. As soon as the words came out, those who were ready to leave immediately stopped, and even many who had left came back. It would be a waste not to eat the free beggar's chicken. Moreover, a chicken costs 50 taels. If they could eat it, wouldn't it be a big bargain? They couldn't miss such a benefit. With such thoughts, many people sat down, ordered some side dishes, and began to wait patiently. Although Li Shanbao took away all the chefs, the helpers were still there. It was not a problem for them to cook some ordinary side dishes. The kitchen of the restaurant had already been busy. In order not to take up her time and to improve efficiency, Su Li spent several days refining the steps of beggar's chicken. Su Li spent several days to refine the steps of the beggar's chicken. Each helper was responsible for one task, such as handling the chicken, spreading the seasonings, roasting the charcoal, and so on. In this way, the helpers quickly mastered it. Although the beggar's chicken made by the assembly line could not be compared with that made by Su Li herself, the taste was not bad. Su Zipei stood in the middle of the kitchen and became a complete bystander. Although she had memorized the process of making the beggar's chicken, she still felt at a loss when she stood here today. Moreover, looking at the greasy stoves, Su Zipei felt nauseous and wanted to leave immediately. You must be Miss Su Zipei who invented the beggar's chicken. A hearty voice suddenly came from behind her. Su Zipei was so shocked that she almost jumped up. She saw a burly middle-aged man dressed in a chef's uniform looking at her with a smile. His expression actually carried some sincerity and admiration. This person was a chef. Su Zipei was slightly flustered and did not dare to show her usual arrogance. She quickly bowed slightly and said, I am Su Zipei. May I know who you are? Ha, miss, you are so polite. My name is He Shi. I am just a new chef. Miss, please take care of me in the future. Seeing Su Zipei treat him so politely, He Shi felt comfortable and thought that it was right to jump to this restaurant. In the original restaurant, he did not have such a high status. You are flattering me. I am young and inexperienced. Please take care of me in the future, Uncle He. Su Zipei imitated the adults to say the polite words, but she was uneasy. If He Shi asked her about the beggar's chicken, it would be terrible. No. Miss, what are you talking about? He Shi's tone was full of admiration and he praised, the beggar's chicken you made is rare in the world. Even the chef of the restaurant in the county town can't make it. What's more, you can think of the detailed steps of cooking. It's really novel and unique. It's eye-catching. It will be imitated by other restaurants in the future. Haha. Uncle He, you are so polite. Su Zipei smiled very reluctantly, and sweat gradually appeared on her forehead. Fortunately, as the only chef in the restaurant, He Shi was soon called to work and had no time to ask other questions. Su Zipei stood in the same place for a moment and spat out a mouthful of turbid air, as if to spit out all the pressure she had suffered these days. Looking at the busy figures around, Su Zipei suddenly felt suffocated. How could all this be brought by Su Area? Su Area, the ugly and dark-skinned good-for-nothing, how could she become so outstanding? It was definitely not Su Area who invented these delicacies. She must have learned them secretly. Yes, she stole them. Su Zipei's eyes suddenly brightened, as if she had found the right answer. It must be the second sister who stole the recipe from somewhere. She just cooks according to the recipe. In fact, she has no talent for cooking at all. If I can also get that recipe, I will definitely be able to replace Su Area and become a real genius. Su Zipei was excited in her heart, and her eyes rolled quickly. No one knew what she was thinking. For 4 hours, the guests waiting in the restaurant waited from early morning to noon. The number of people did not decrease, but increased. It was the time for lunch at noon. Many passers-by saw the byway building full of guests and followed the crowd to wait. After coming in, people spread the information to each other. The passers-by who didn't know the matter knew about the beggar's chicken. In this way, people who were not in a hurry to leave. The dishes are served. An orderly voice came from the kitchen, and a dozen or so waiters came out from the back with plates of food in their hands. Each of their plates had at least 2 big balls of soil on them. People who had been looking forward to it for a long time were suddenly shocked. What is this? The beggar's chicken. You're right, sir. A sharp-tongued young man immediately shouted, this is the famous dish of our restaurant, the beggar's chicken. But you haven't seen the real dish yet. Please be patient. While they were talking, the waiters had put the dishes on the table, just one for each table. 8 people sat around the table, and all looked curiously at the clay balls that were still smoking. It's time to see the real appearance of the beggar's chicken. Guests, please look carefully. The young boy picked up the hammer and gently knocked on the outer mud shell. The mud shell suddenly cracked open from the middle with a "kacha" sound. Although the other waiters were not as dexterous as the young man, they also successfully knocked the clay shell. In an instant, the whole restaurant was full of fragrance. There was a neat sound of inhalation, and the fragrance drifted far away, which attracted many pedestrians to stop and watch. This time, there were dozens of beggar's chicken, and the fragrance was stronger. It was more lively than the last time when the 3 restaurants tasted dishes. Wow, it's really fragrant. I have never smelled such a unique fragrance in my life. The well-dressed young master seemed to have never seen the world. The knowledgeable middle-aged man beside him nodded and commented, a good dish must have both color and fragrance. Now the fragrance is enough, and the next step is to look at the color and taste. Yes, what Mr. Zhou said is very reasonable. Mr. Zhou is also here. Yes, Mr. Zhou is a famous gourmet. How can he miss such delicious food? The middle-aged man called Mr. Zhou was so hungry that he pointed to the beggar's chicken wrapped in lotus leaves and asked, waiter, do we have to wrap the beggar's chicken in lotus leaves? I have tasted the taste of lotus leaves, and it is not so wonderful. You must be joking, sir. The young man smiled brightly, untied the cotton thread quickly, peeled off the lotus leaves, and revealed the whole golden chicken inside. The fragrance of the whole restaurant rose to a higher level. Good, good, good. Mr. Zhou said, good, 3 times in a row, and continued to comment, although the whole chicken is not round enough, we are in a hurry today, so it is understandable. The color of this chicken is golden, and the chicken skin is intact, which shows that it has been specially treated. But I don't know if there is a secret in the belly of the chicken, or it will be too empty to eat only one chicken. Before he finished his words, people at other tables had already begun to eat, and only vague, it's delicious, could be heard. People at this table had long been drooling, but they dared not to eat because Mr. Zhou had not moved his chopsticks. Mr. Zhou smiled apologetically, picked up a knife and cut the chicken in the middle, revealing the chic stuffing. Good. There is really a secret. This dish deserves the word signature. In this way, my Daesu town finally has its own famous restaurant. I am very relieved. As he said, people at the table had begun to eat. Mr. Zhou calmly picked up a piece of chicken and put it into his mouth. His eyes suddenly brightened, and he chewed it quickly. Although he wanted to pretend to be knowledgeable, the chicken was too delicious. His hands immediately sped up and joined the army of scrambling for the chicken. What are you doing? This piece of meat is mine. You are robbing me. You have eaten so much. Can't you give this piece to me? Motherfucker, when have I ever been robbed of food in my life? Beat him up. It seemed that they were about to fight. Fortunately, the constables who had been waiting outside the door rushed in, and the dispute was instantly extinguished. The shopkeeper looked at the scene and felt relieved. The new boss's means were really superb. He even thought of this point. Fang Yuan is very clever. Fortunately, I was soft-hearted and accepted him at that time. Otherwise, I may not have such a good effect today. The shopkeeper looked at the little boy shuttling in the crowd and couldn't help laughing. He heard that the boy had a younger sister to support. Well, he would be rewarded today. Shopkeeper, give me another plate of beggar's chicken. I will spend the 50 taels. The rich young master took out 50 taels and put it on the table, and said loudly. Other rich people followed suit and took out 50 taels one after another. The beggar's chicken had completely conquered them. Those who were not rich could only be envious and secretly scold profiteers. Chapter 35. As soon as the words came out, everyone was shocked. Such delicious chicken was not the famous dish of the restaurant. Are you kidding me? At this time, the shopkeeper continued, the real beggar's chicken has strict requirements on the heat and ingredients. Only Miss Sue, the owner of the restaurant, can make it by herself and spend a lot of time. Unfortunately, Miss Sue is still young, and she can't make much by herself. Therefore, Miss Sue came up with a way to reduce the process and increase the output. This way, everyone can taste the beggar's chicken, which is slightly lacking in taste. I see. Miss Sue is really considerate. Mr. Zhou was moved to tears. Since you love foods so much, you should be my confidant. I will visit you another day. So, the shopkeeper pointed to the sign placed next to him, the real beggar's chicken costs 50 taels, which is not expensive at all. This restaurant accepts advance reservations every month, and there are only 3 plates a month. Today, the beggar's chicken you can taste is unlimited, and the price is only 10 taels a plate. The price was suddenly reduced to 1/5 of the original price, and everyone felt it was cheap. Middle-class families who couldn't afford it couldn't help but order another plate to satisfy their appetite. For a whole day, the kitchen kept making beggar's chicken, but even so, it could only last for 3 rounds. After 3 rounds, it was late at night. After the restaurant was closed, people left. Master, look! The prophet of the first day of the restaurant comes out. In the study of the main courtyard of the Su house, the old butler hurried in with a booklet. Su Huanli immediately took it and couldn't wait to look at it. 800 taels in the first day. Excluding the materials, the net profit is more than 500 taels, which is much more profitable than the silk shop. Su Huanli was so excited that his hands were shaking. This was the profit of the restaurant for a day. Even if he only took 40% of it, it was more than 200 taels, which was 6,000 taels of silver in a month. Master, your business strategy is excellent. First, you marked the high price of 50 taels to keep people guessing, and then let them be addicted to it for free, and finally reduce the price. In this way, no one could bear it at all. Even a small wealthy family would be willing to fork out money to buy it. Su Huanli was ashamed. This was not his strategy. It was clearly what Arya told him. At that time, he thought it was unreliable. What should he do if he scared everyone away with 50 taels of silver? But he also knew that even if he let Arya cook 24 hours a day, it would definitely not be able to satisfy everyone's appetite. He couldn't think of any other way in a short time, so he could only do as she said. But he didn't expect the effect to be so good when it was put into practice. Not only did she raise the price of the beggar's chicken, but even the dishes cooked by her daughter had become treasures that people scrambled to reserve. Arya's business talent was also so high. If she ran the Byway building, the profits might be higher. In the past, the highest price of the signature dish of the Byway building was 1 tael of silver. Now it is 10 times more expensive. Those people even think it is cheap. Really? Su Huanli shook his head and couldn't help laughing. His previous fear was swept away and he sat firmly on the octagonal chair. Now, all he had to do was to guard the chicken farm and sit at home collecting money. How comfortable. Late at night, there were few people on the streets of the Desu town. Fang Yuan moved quickly in the dimly lit alley. After a while, he stopped in front of an old courtyard. Is it brother? Fang Ling, who heard the movement, leaned against the courtyard door and asked softly. Fang Yuan's vigilance disappeared. He put away his tiredness and whispered, "It's me. Ling, open the door." Squeak. The courtyard door was immediately opened, and Fang Ling's happy face appeared. "Brother, you finally come back. I was so worried. Did those guys in the restaurant embarrass you? I heard from my sister that people in the Dahan country are very cunning and vicious." Fang Yuan came in with a small package. Fang Ling kept talking as she closed the door, but she didn't dare to look directly at her brother. In the soft light of the oil lamp in the room, Fang Yuan's face also softened. He gently wiped away the tears in Fang Ling's eyes. He was so distressed. The girl must cry secretly during the day. "I was blinded by the wind. I didn't cry." Fang Ling hurriedly explained, but there were signs of tears in her eyes. Fang Yuan quickly changed the topic. "The shopkeeper is very nice. He not only raised my salary but also gave me a special reward. Ling, open it and have a look. Ling, open it and have a look." Fang Ling was really attracted to it. She carefully opened the package and saw half of the beggar's chicken without skin. She immediately cheered. "Wow, it's the beggar's chicken. Brother, you are so great. I heard that it costs 50 taels of silver. I'm going to heat it up now. Let's eat together later." Fang Yuan nodded and watched Fang Ling walk into the kitchen with the beggar's chicken. His smile disappeared and his fists were almost bleeding. "Little Fang, the half of the chicken fell into the swill bucket. You did a good job today. It's your reward. Do well in the future, okay?" Even if he was no longer high and mighty, he was still an upright and dignified person, not a beggar who dealt with trash. But the restaurant hadn't paid the wages yet. They could only eat this. In the luxurious courtyard not far from the east of the small courtyard, a group of ruffians were sitting together and playing cards. From time to time, there was a woman's voice. "What about the boy? Hey, we stole his money. He and his sister wandered on the street. You gave them the shabby courtyard on credit. He was grateful. I didn't expect that the boy was so rich. He even had more than 500 taels of silver. Ha ha ha, no matter how rich he is, he belongs to us." It was late at night. There was no moon tonight. It was so dark that one couldn't see his fingers. When Su Li woke up the next morning, she saw that there were hundreds of orders sent by Su Huanli. According to the share of 3 plates per month, the orders sent on the first day were enough to last until the next year. It is said that people in the Desu town are not rich. I don't think so. Su Li sighed in her heart. The beggar's chicken could not be spread to other towns in one day. These orders were all from the Desu town. Putting the orders aside, Su Li still worked and rested as usual. There was no sign of cooking at all. Su Huanli was anxious when he received the news. He put down his affairs and ran to her immediately. He said in a slow tone, "Arya, the orders are almost piled up. It's not reasonable to let go of money. Why don't you work hard and finish all these orders?" Su Li refused and said seriously, "Daddy, it's not that I can't bear hardships. It is said in the book that the rarer something is, the greater its value. If I cook too much, no matter how delicious the beggar's chicken is, it will not make those distinguished guests feel that it is worth the money. Instead, they will feel that it is a loss." Speaking of this, Su Li paused and said, "Moreover, the meaning of the signature dish is not the food itself. It is the thing to show the identity of those rich people. If it becomes available to everyone, those rich people won't care about it and won't place another order. Dad, don't be blinded by the benefits in front of you." Su Huanli suddenly woke up from his dream. His daughter was right. Doing business should have a long-term vision. If he really did it as he said, it would be killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. It would only destroy the good situation. I am wrong. Su Huanli sighed and said, I didn't expect that you know so much at such a young age. I am impressed by you. Su Huanli praised, but there was still a trace of unwillingness in his heart. It was more than 5,000 taels of silver. It's all because Mr. Qi taught me well. Su Li began to put the blame on Qi Xianqing. Mr. Qi not only taught me to read and write, but also told me the truth of life and the way of life. I also think that it seems more correct to follow Mr. Qi's way. I see. Mr. Qi is really a supermundane person. Su Huanli echoed, but he was unprecedentedly vigilant. He used to think that Qi Xianqing was good because there was no conflict of interest. But now Arya was an important figure in the Su family. If Qi Xianqing taught Arya the heart of resistance, his life would not be so good. It seems that I have to find a way. Su Huanli left with a wicked idea. Su Li smiled as if she didn't see anything. Then she sat down to study the book. What she was reading at the moment was the 5th hurdle of the Ghost Valley meditation direction. Miss, I find that more than half of the plants brought by the old master are gone. Is it stolen? Mammy Li came in and asked nervously. Su Li shook her head and said, Don't worry, Mammy. I found that those are poisonous, so I threw them all away. That's good. Mammy Li breathed a sigh of relief. She inadvertently glanced at a black porcelain bottle on the table, but she didn't ask more. There were a lot of seasonings that the miss had tinkered with. Suddenly, Mammy Li thought of something and her expression became nervous. She ran to close the door and then came back and whispered, Miss, the maid you bought before told me that the 3rd miss has been inquiring about the layout of your study these days. Su Li was slightly stunned and immediately chuckled, Zipei. What does she want to steal? The study of the miss is full of books. In addition to books, there are only recipes for studying. What else is there to steal? Halfway through, Mammy Li suddenly realized and widened her eyes. Is it? Su Li shook her head helplessly. If she wants to take it, let her take it. The 3rd sister has been pretending to be me in the restaurant for 2 days. She must have suffered a lot. Miss. Mammy Li suddenly became anxious. Su Zipei treated you like that. You, Mammy, don't say more. You go to greet the guards and tell them that I called the 3rd sister to come here. Don't embarrass them. Hearing Su Li's order, Mammy Li stamped her feet and could only do as she said. No matter how much she cared about Su Arya, she didn't dare to overstep her duty. The biggest taboo for a servant was to disobey the master's words. Who dared to use a servant who didn't even obey the master's words? The miss is still too soft-hearted. I hope nothing bad happens. After instructing the guards, Mammy Li was full of worries. She could only hope that Su Zipei still had a conscience and didn't really come to steal the recipe as she and the miss guessed. In the study, Su Li put down the writing brush and gently dried the ink. She was writing the recipe. There was no complete recipe for the beggar's chicken in the study. Since Su Zipei wanted it, of course, she had to prepare it in advance. She didn't make any mistakes on the recipe. It was even several times more detailed than the one she gave to the kitchen helpers. My dear 3rd sister, don't let me down. Chapter 36. At this moment, the Baiwei building was still as prosperous as yesterday. Su Zipei stayed in the restaurant for a day and finally found an excuse to go back in the evening. It was already dark when she arrived at the Su house. Su Zipei looked at the Jinyuan court from a distance and found that there were not many guards. As long as she found the right time, she could get in. She carefully hid in the side and covered with flowers and plants. After a few minutes, her eyes flashed and she ran over quickly. In the dark, a young guard saw this scene and asked hesitantly, Captain, are you really not going to stop her? I think the 3rd miss. Boy, we are only responsible for safety. don't get involved in other things. Do you understand? The young guard touched his head and didn't really understand. After all, he didn't jump out to stop Suzy Pei. She came out so easily. It seems that area is not valued by my father as much as I thought. Suzy Pei's tense nerves were slightly relaxed. She walked through the deserted courtyard to the study and carefully poked the window paper to look inside. She saw that the room was empty and there was no one. Suzy Pei was overjoyed and gently pushed the door open. Squeak, there was a light sound. The door was not locked. Suzy Pei flashed in and closed the door. Her heart was beating wildly. She didn't have time to explore the gorgeous study. She rummaged on the bookshelf for a long time but found nothing. Nothing. Impossible. Suzy Pei was so anxious that her forehead was sweating. Her right hand accidentally touched the roll of paper on the desk and it fell to the ground. Oh no. Suzy Pei's expression changed slightly. She immediately picked it up and was ready to put it back. Inadvertently, she glanced at the handwriting on the paper. At this glance, Suzy Pei suddenly widened her eyes and opened the roll of paper to take a closer look. This was clearly the recipe of the beggar's chicken that she had been looking for. It's really effortless to find it. Suzy Pei tightly grasped the paper with her hands trembling slightly. She was so excited that she almost jumped up. Hearing that there were no footsteps outside, Suzy Pei became much bolder. She carefully wiped the traces of searching in the study and then left the Jinyuan court with the recipe. From the beginning to the end, she did not notice that on the roof beam above her, a pair of eyes that were as deep as the dark night had seen everything clearly. Even the recipe had fallen to the ground, and it had been deliberately done by her. The next morning, Suli got up on time and practiced for 4 hours. After breakfast, she stepped out of the gate of the Jinyuan court. Coincidentally, Suzy Pei passed by with a pair of panda eyes. Both of them were stunned. They did not expect to meet each other at this time. Is third sister going to a restaurant? You don't seem to have slept well. Is the work in the restaurant too tiring? Suli reacted first and asked with concern. Her black eyes under her long eyelashes were flawless, pure, and shining like gems. It was as if every word she said was sincere and could not be faked. Suzy Pei's expression changed instantly. Like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, she said guiltily, "Ah. What was second sister talking about? As a daughter of the Su family, I should do something for the family. How can it be tiring? Second sister, why did you go to Mr. Chi's place at this time?" Suli smiled lightly and said, "There were too many patients in the Baichao Tang in the morning, so Mr. Chi arranged for Qinghao and me to attend the class 4 hours later. I heard that mother found a new teacher for third sister. Third sister, don't disappoint mother." How can you call your mother as a bastard?" Suzy Pei muttered in an imperceptible voice. She didn't want to listen to Suli's preaching tone and turned away. Suli stood still and her expression did not change at all. She even smiled more. Bastard, in the summer, the Desu town was like a quiet stream flowing by the river. The days became calm. Suli paid no attention to the outside world. She read, learned to read, practiced and cooked every day. It seemed that she never mentioned the words, Baiwei building. Mammy Li sighed secretly. It was a pity. She heard that Suzy Pei had been recognized by the chefs with the stolen recipe. She initially took over the business of the Baiwei building. She also did a good job in management and was frequently praised by the master. The miss didn't make new dishes. If it went on like this, there was an episode these days. Su Huanli came to ask Su Li to write a recipe of zongzi. Obviously, he was ready to expand the profit. "Daddy, I remember that you have made an agreement with the squire that the Su family will not disclose the recipe of zongzi. Even I am not allowed to make it." Long-winded. Su Huanli's smiling face suddenly became serious and he scolded, "What do you know? Don't meddle in the adult's business. Write the recipe. Don't waste time. Su Huanli's attitude was far from that of the intimate way he asked her to study new dishes a few days ago. Su Li pursed her lips aggrievedly, but she still bowed her head and wrote the recipe silently. After that, Su Huanli couldn't wait to grab it. He glanced at it roughly and left happily. Mammy Li couldn't stand it and said, "Miss, the master." Su Li shook her head slightly. She slowly sat back in the chair and supported her chin with her hands. She turned her head and looked out of the window. There seemed to be a bright smile in her eyes. Be careful. A man who is never content is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. My stupid daddy. Su Huanli took the recipe and hurriedly entered the byway building from the back door. At a glance, he saw his third daughter, Su Zipei, was busy roasting beggar's chicken in front of the boiler. Su Huanli was pleased and said, "Third girl is sensible." It seems that even without the help of Arya, third girl can take charge and cook beggar's chicken alone. Boss, why are you here? The shopkeeper got the news and came to ask respectfully. Call the recently invited chef to come here immediately. As soon as Su Huanli gave the order, he sure, who looked honest, was called. Boss, what's the matter? Su Huanli winked and the shopkeeper immediately came to his ear and whispered, he is invited by the Zhu family, but he is not a member of the Zhu family. Su Huanli suddenly frowned. He really didn't want the Zhu family to intervene and share the profits. But he didn't have the connections to find a restaurant chef like He Sure. I have a recipe here. Help me to identify it. Su Huanli took out the paper and handed it to He Sure. He Sure took it with a puzzled look. His eyes moved to the beautiful words with a trace of arrogance, and he couldn't move it anymore. Well? With Ruoyi. So, it's really wonderful. He Sure was puzzled for a while and then suddenly understood. Su Huanli and the shopkeeper looked strange. At this time, He Sure came to his senses and smiled embarrassedly, "Sorry to make you laugh. I can't help but be excited when I see a good recipe." So, the recipe is real? Su Huanli said with excitement. Seeing Su Li's unwilling face, he was really afraid that the recipe was fake. Of course it's true. To be able to use such an ingenious method to make snacks, it can be said that the culinary skills of the person who researched the recipe have reached a level that I can't even imagine. He Sure praised unreservedly, this recipe must be the latest research of Miss Su Zipei, right? Miss Su is really a genius. Su Huanli blushed because of the praise. At the same time, he was excited about the upcoming profits. At this time, the shopkeeper took the recipe from He Sure and looked at it. After reading it, he frowned and thought. Suddenly, he was enlightened. Boss, isn't this the famous signature dish of the byway building, the fragrance of 100 miles? Yes. Su Huanli raised his head slightly and said proudly, the fragrance of 100 miles was created by my daughter. I see. The shopkeeper was also happy and said, in this way, there is one more signature dish in the restaurant. The helpers are also familiar with the production process of the fragrance of 100 miles. I will order people to prepare the materials. As for the production, I leave it to you, Chef He. He Sure nodded solemnly and said, I will live up to your expectations. Under such excellent conditions, the first pot of zongzi was cooked in the evening. The menu was hung on the most conspicuous place besides the beggar's chicken on the counter. It immediately attracted others' attention. Look! It's the fragrance of 100 miles. The byway building will sell it again. Great! The taste is very unique. I still can't forget it. I thought that the byway building would not have this dish when the owner was changed. Waiter, give me the fragrance of 100 miles. Me too. In an instant, there was a small climax in the restaurant. After the fermentation of the beggar's chicken, people were reassured by the zongzi. The reputation of the byway building in the Desu town was unparalleled. It even spread to several neighboring towns. Li Shanbao, who was planning the new restaurant, naturally heard it. Bastard! Su Huanli, the old guy, broke his promise. I had bought the recipe of the zongzi, but he actually sold it. Li Wei was so angry that his fat body trembled. During this time, he was so busy that he lost a lot of weight. He thought that the Baiwei building could be restored soon. He didn't expect that the Su family not only made the beggar's chicken but also sold the fragrance of 100 miles. Li Shanbao looked calm. He picked up the teacup and took a sip. The little bastard of the Yang family doesn't know how to behave. Even the old guy, Su Huanli, doesn't know when to retreat. It seems that I don't have to save face for them. Wei, secretly gather all the owners of the other restaurants. The next day, on the east street of the Desu town, the Baiwei building was full of guests as usual. There was a long line outside the restaurant and waiters were shuttling. Table C is empty. This way, please. Guest from room B on the second floor, please come in. The shopkeeper observed for a moment at the door. Seeing that everything was normal and nothing happened, he wanted to turn back to the back room for a rest. At this moment, crack. The porcelain plate was smashed on the brick surface. Fang Yuan stared at the angry rich businessman in front of him blankly and didn't know what to do. It's full of the smell of mud. It's not for people to eat. The beggar's chicken, is clearly for beggars. Exactly. I think the beggar's chicken has an undeserved reputation. It's a lie that people fight for it. A chicken sells for 10 taels of silver. Why don't the Baiwei building rob it? Chapter 37. The guests who were attracted by the reputation of the Baiwei building were watching the bustle and listening. Their original admiration for the Baiwei building was immediately shaken. Listening to what they said, I also feel that it is expensive. Yes, the most expensive dish in the Baiwei building was the fragrance of Bailey Li. Now the beggar's chicken has increased by 10 times. I didn't think it was expensive before. I must be confused by the profiteer. Baiwei building, you pay me money. Baiwei building, pay me money. Pay me money. Pushed by a group of people with ulterior motives, the crowd was excited. The distinguished guests on the second floor couldn't swallow the quarrel and had to leave unhappily. Everyone, please calm down. Please calm down. The shopkeeper was overwhelmed by the crowd. Someone threw the leftovers under the pushing and shoving of the crowd. Soon he was covered with red and green stains. He was embarrassed. This is going to be a big problem. Everything was fine these days. Why suddenly? The shopkeeper climbed out and saw Fang Yuan, who was in a daze. He immediately brightened his eyes and said, "Boy, go and inform the boss. I will give you a month's salary immediately." Fang Yuan's eyes brightened slightly. He turned around and ran to the kitchen to ask for the address of the Su family. Then he immediately rushed to the Su family. He didn't even know that the pneuma of cultivation that he usually hid was exposed. Su Li, who was practicing in the Jinyuan court, opened her eyes in surprise and said, "This pneuma, in front of the Vermilion Gate." Fang Yuan gasped and said intermittently, "Guard. Guard, I am a waiter of the Baiwei building. Something happened there." "Master," before he finished his words, the two guards' faces changed dramatically. One of them immediately went inside to report. "I got the salary. I hope the shopkeeper will keep his promise." Fang Yuan breathed a sigh of relief. Thinking of his sister's surprise when she saw the salary, he couldn't help but smile brightly. In fact, he didn't care about the Baiwei building at all. The bones in the battlefield of Nanjiang country were piled up higher than the Baiwei building. He knew that he should be cautious. If he had money to eat, he would not expose his cultivation. The martial arts circle in the Dahan country is not prosperous. The location of the Desu town is remote. No one should find my pneuma. Fang Yuan thought. When he heard the footsteps, he looked up and saw Su Li coming out of the gate with a smile. The bright and clean smile immediately made Fang Yuan's calmness become sluggish. Fang Yuan didn't expect that the kind-hearted miss who helped him and his sister on that day was actually a daughter of the Su family. But, didn't the Su family only have one daughter? He had seen Su Zipei in the restaurant. Who was this woman in front of him? It's you. Su Li seemed to have just found Fang Yuan. She stepped in with a comfortable and fresh fragrance. Fang Yuan's face was slightly red and he took a step back. It's just a bunch of female skeletons. Who knows how many of them have died on the battlefield? Why would I care? Fang Yuan snorted in his heart, but his heart was beating wildly. Back then, he was just an ordinary beggar on the side of the road. After not seeing each other for so many days, this woman actually still remembered him. Su Li looked at Fang Yuan, who was silent and didn't care. She continued to smile and said, "How is your sister? You don't have to return my 500 taels of silver. Why are you dressed like this?" Fang Yuan remembered that his money was stolen and looked embarrassed. He was not careful enough. He not only failed his sister but also failed to live up to the kindness of the person in front of him. How could he explain it? He really couldn't explain it directly. "Arya, why are you here?" A hurried voice came from behind. Su Li seemed to be shocked. She turned around and saw Su Huanli and the housekeeper coming in a hurry. Fang Yuan couldn't help but be surprised when he heard Su Huanli's name. He said, "Such a beautiful woman has such a casual name. I'm afraid she is not the daughter of the Su family." Su Li's smile was deeper. She lowered her head and said, "Daddy, I just come out to relax." Her words broke Fang Yuan's inner speculation. There was really a second daughter in the Su family. Was it? "Well, don't come out to hang out. Are you the waiter of the Baiwei building?" Su Huanli didn't have time to think why Su Li appeared here. He called Fang Yuan and got on the carriage. "Hurry up. Let's talk while walking." "Yes, master." Fang Yuan was flattered and climbed on the carriage. Before leaving, he couldn't help but look back at Su Li, who was still smiling. A mysterious feeling rose from the bottom of his heart. Was he moved? Fang Yuan smiled bitterly and dispersed these thoughts. Now he was not qualified to talk about love. Maybe it was impossible in this life. Su Li watched the carriage disappear at the corner of the official road. Then she turned around and walked back slowly. She didn't expect that the boy who picked up leftovers for her on the street had cultivation. It was more and more interesting. Fang Yuan's speed was very fast. But when Su Huanli arrived, the Baiwei building was in a mess. There were smashed tables and chairs everywhere. The money in the cabinets was also robbed. Su Huanli only felt a surge of anger. He was about to spit blood from his mouth. He had been doing business for so many years, but he had never seen such barbaric behavior. The shopkeeper in ragged clothes knelt on the ground. When he saw Su Huanli, he seemed to see his savior. He shouted, "Boss is coming! Boss is coming!" In an instant, dozens of eyes fell on Su Huanli. A kind of pressure came out of nowhere. "Everyone!" Su Huanli stood in the middle of the lobby with a calm face. He looked like a general and said, "What's wrong with the Baiwei building? Why are you so angry?" A gentleman uses words instead of fists. "Let's sit down and have a good talk." Seeing that the person in charge had arrived, the ruffians who specialized in causing trouble quietly retreated, leaving behind only the person in charge. Although Fang Yuan saw it, he didn't say much. "Well, Boss Su is really responsible." A man with a simple and honest appearance stood up and said. He had a broad face, which made people feel that he was a loyal and honest person. "I only have one question. Why is the price of the previous signature dish only 1 tael of silver? The price of the beggar's chicken soars 10 times or even 50 times. Is Boss Su too greedy? The man hit the nail on the head. Su Huanli said calmly, "Brother, your words are incorrect. How can the previous signature dish of the Baiwei building compare with the beggar's chicken? In terms of ingredients, the ingredients of the beggar's chicken are selected from wild plants by my daughter. All of them are new. Even the chicken has a strict standard. At that time, I mobilized my whole family to find one for half a month. Then, I cultivated and developed the chicken farm according to this standard to provide ingredients for the restaurant. The world is so big, but the beggar's chicken is the only one." Seeing that Su Huanli said it in such detail, the man thought it was not good. Our Su family has spent so much effort to make unique delicacies for everyone. But now we are called liars. It's so disappointing. Su Huanli pretended to be distressed. Immediately, most people felt sorry for him. It turns out that there are so many inside stories. We have wronged the Su family, we also smashed the restaurant. We shouldn't have done that. Yes. The man's face suddenly changed. He sneered and said, "Boss Su is really a businessman. You said it beautifully in a few words. But I don't believe it. How old is your daughter? She can filter ingredients and make such delicious food at such a young age? The way I see it, it's most likely that your Su family got a recipe from somewhere and forcefully created a cooking genius." Nonsense. Su Huanli was full of confidence. "These delicacies are researched by my daughter. If they are fake, I am willing to be struck by lightning." Seeing that Su Huanli was so righteous, the man was a little uncertain. At this time, a voice came from the crowd. "Haha, it's all talk and no action. Boss Su is so sure. Why don't you let Miss Su Zipei make a beggar's chicken in person to convince us?" As soon as the words came out, everyone echoed, "Yes, let Miss Su make a beggar's chicken on the spot and invite Mr. Zhou and other chefs to come and taste. If the chefs can be convinced, the Baiwei building is worthy of the name. It's a good idea. Boss Su, please agree." "Agree." Su Huanli's expression changed dramatically. The recipe was indeed researched by the daughter of the Su family. But it was not Su Zipei but Su Area. Seeing this, the honest man was relieved. It turned out that this guy pretended to be calm. He was almost cheated. It's a little inappropriate to let Miss Su show up in public. But the most important thing now is to give us an explanation. What do you think, Boss Su? Since the honest man said so, Su Huanli had no choice but to agree. Otherwise, the reputation of the Baiwei building was bound to plummet. No matter how much compensation was made in the future, it couldn't be recovered. He could only snort coldly and said, "Today I have to rebuild the restaurant. Tomorrow at noon, please come to be a witness." Good. Boss Su is really straightforward. The simple and honest man laughed and left the restaurant. The rest of the onlookers also left in twos and threes. The matter about tomorrow's restaurant quickly spread in the Desu town. After everyone left, the shopkeeper ordered to clean up the restaurant and was ready to leave. Fang Yuan frowned and hesitated for a moment. Then he ran to pull the shopkeeper and said, "Shopkeeper, the wages, you still want to ask me for wages?" The shopkeeper flicked his sleeves and said with a sullen face, "The restaurant is almost gone. You still think about the wages? If you don't want to work, get out of here." Fang Yuan's eyes were full of anger. His face was red because of excessive anger. He buried his fists in his sleeves and wanted to punch the head of the man in front of him. But in the end, he did nothing and said nothing. Boy, be more careful." Seeing that Fang Yuan was honest, the shopkeeper patted his sleeves that were caught. He said a word and followed Su Huanli happily. "Boss, do you really want Miss to cook the beggar's chicken in the restaurant?" The shopkeeper chased after Su Huanli and asked. Su Huanli was worried and had a headache. Naturally, his face was not good. The shopkeeper hit the muzzle of the gun. He scolded him directly, or you can think of a way for me to hand over the restaurant to you. Why do you manage me like this? How did this happen today? Explain it to me clearly, or you can pack up and leave. Chapter 38. Su Huanli was slightly shocked. He was also confused by the sudden attack. He didn't expect that the crux of the problem lay in other restaurants. I'm confused. Wu, don't take it to heart. Su Huanli sighed and patted the shopkeeper's shoulder. Shopkeeper Wu didn't feel good, but he didn't say anything. He could only say politely, "Boss, you are too serious." In my opinion. He sure interrupted at this time, "Boss, don't worry. Mr. Zhou and others are not short of money and won't be bribed by other restaurants. As long as Miss Su performs normally tomorrow, she will definitely win. Maybe the reputation of our restaurant can be further improved." Speaking of this, he sure laughed. Speaking of which, I haven't tasted the beggar's chicken made by Miss Su. I want to see it. Su Huanli was speechless for a while and didn't know what to say. Su Zipei, who was eavesdropping outside the door, was overjoyed. She immediately stood up and shouted, "Daddy, what are you talking about?" He sure looked back and quickly saluted. It turns out to be Miss Su. I think Miss Su has already heard about it. Yes. Su Zipei nodded and her confident eyes fell on Su Huanli. "Daddy, don't worry about tomorrow. I can handle it." Then she walked to Su Huanli and whispered, "I found the recipe in my sister's room and tried it in the kitchen these days. It must be okay." Su Huanli was overjoyed when he heard the words. It was great news. "Zipei, it's up to you tomorrow." "Yes, Daddy." Su Zipei said sweetly and sneered in her heart. Su area, when I completely replace you, I will get rid of you completely. Even your ashes will not be left." The housekeeper looked aside and couldn't help but worry. Su Huanli returned to the Su family in a carriage. When he passed the Jinyuan court guarded by guards, he paused and didn't step over it. Instead, he turned away. The housekeeper followed him with more doubts in his eyes. When he returned to the study of the main courtyard, the housekeeper couldn't help but ask, "Master, do you really believe third miss? If she screws up tomorrow, how is it possible?" Su Huanli waved his hand and laughed loudly. "Zipei has been helping in the restaurant during this time, and she also got the detailed recipe of making beggar's chicken. She has already tried it. There is absolutely no problem." Li Yin had heard it before. At this moment, he pretended to be surprised and said, "How could third miss have a detailed recipe? Could it be? It doesn't matter how she came. As long as we can solve the restaurant's problem tomorrow, everything is negotiable." Su Huanli interrupted Li Yin's words and frowned. "Old Li, are you old and have more doubts? Why do you have so many questions?" Li Yin smiled embarrassedly and continued, "Something is wrong recently, but second miss, I was just about to say it." Su Huanli knocked on the table and snorted, "This girl is getting more and more outrageous. She still wants to sneak out to play today." This month, he didn't cook except for reading and writing. He might be rusty in cooking beggar's chicken, and there was no sign of new dishes being developed. "Now that you've grown up, you even know how to bully your own father." Li Yin forced a smile and said, "Didn't second miss give advice for the restaurant before? As a result, the profits of the restaurant increased greatly. Why do you still mention this?" Su Huanli suddenly became more angry. If she didn't put forward this bad idea, would the restaurant fall into this situation? In his words, he didn't mention the agreement of Zongzi at all. Li Yin's smile gradually disappeared, and he no longer refuted. Instead, he echoed, "You're right, Lord." Su Huanli's breath also calmed down and he said, "I let Zipei replace her with the intention of beating her. Don't be complacent because she has a little talent. Unexpectedly, she not only doesn't know her mistake, but also goes further." I asked her to increase the share of the precious beggar's chicken, but she refused. It really pissed me off. Speaking of this, Su Huanli became excited. Originally, I thought that this matter must be screwed up. I didn't expect that Zipei was also a good girl. She even learned the craft quietly. She is really my good daughter. Housekeeper, prepare more guards for Zipei. She can't have any mishaps right now. Withdraw the guards near Jinyuan Court. Now we don't have to worry about area's safety. Yes, Lord. Li Yin respectfully retreated with no expression. He didn't stop until he walked out of the main courtyard. His hands and feet were cold. After a while, Li Yin muttered to himself and left with a sigh. Su Huanli, did you really save my life out of kindness? Jinyuan Court, Mammy Li helplessly watched those guards withdraw. She couldn't help but say to Su Li, who was concentrating on practicing calligraphy, Miss, those guards are all gone. None of them stayed. I see, Mammy. Su Li didn't stop writing. Her eyes were focused and clear. I'm not so delicate. Let them withdraw. Mammy Li sighed. Miss, do you really not understand or pretend to be confused? You really make me anxious. Don't mention it. Mammy, have you inquired about the brother and sister that I asked you to find? Su Li stopped writing and looked up and asked. Miss, do you mean Fang Yuan and Fang Ling? When Mammy Li mentioned this matter, she immediately became energetic. I asked someone to inquire about it. Fang Yuan is now a waiter in the Baiwei building. His sister is too young, so the Baiwei building doesn't accept her. Now they all live in the South Street Alley. The South Street Alley? Su Li slightly raised her eyebrows. It seems not peaceful there. Mammy Li nodded and said worriedly, Miss, you also know that it is dirty and messy. All the people living there are ruffians. I don't know how Fang Yuan found a house. It's not safe to leave his sister there alone. Su Li nodded gently and stopped talking. It was not the first time for Mammy Li to see Su Li like this. She immediately left quietly and quietly closed the door. Early the next morning, a large number of people surrounded the Baiwei building. In the small town where there were no major events on weekdays, the miss of the Su family made the precious beggar's chicken in public, which was undoubtedly explosive news. It was enough to attract most of the people in the town to watch. For this reason, the government had to send constables to maintain order. Officers, you are really working hard. The shopkeeper nodded and bowed. He secretly gave the constables some silver. Su Huanli looked in the room and felt uncomfortable. This was the money of the Su family. The Zhu family and the Yang family didn't spend any money. He went to the Zhu family and the Yang family last night. As a result, the two families were very shrewd. They refused with the excuse of, they are all aiming at the daughter of the Su family. What does it have to do with us? They didn't help him at all. At this time, Su Zipei, who was exquisitely dressed, came out of the room. She pretended to be calm and said, Daddy, I'm ready. I can start at any time. Then, Su Zipei looked at the dense crowd outside. She almost couldn't suppress the excitement in her heart. Today was the day when she became famous. After today, even if Su area stood up and said that the recipes were all hers, no one would believe it again. Master, Mr. Zhou, and the cooks of other restaurants are here. When the servant came to report, Su Huanli's heart suddenly tightened. He gently patted Su Zipei, who was still immersed in joy, and encouraged her, Go, my good daughter. Don't let me down. Su Zipei's eyes were firm and she stepped into the lobby. At this moment, the lobby had been emptied. Only the table for processing ingredients, the stove and the barbecue grill were left as the place for Su Zipei to cook. There were 8 tables opposite the stove. Mr. Zhou, who was called the gourmet, sat in the middle. The other 7 people were the chefs of the restaurants in the nearby towns. There were no seats behind the 8 tables. There were only a large number of ordinary people who came to watch the bustle. Some rich and powerful families occupied the excellent seats on the second floor of the Baiwei building. For this reason, Su Huanli also made a lot of money. The daughter of the Su family is beautiful. Although Su Zipei was nervous, she was still calm. Mr. Zhou nodded slightly. It was not easy for her to have such a performance at such a young age. Su Zipei had prepared a long speech. But she experienced such a scene for the first time. She couldn't think of a word at the moment. In desperation, she could only do it directly. In the eyes of others, she was arrogant. Mr. Zhou frowned slightly and immediately relaxed. She was young and talented. It was normal for her to be arrogant. It was quiet in the field. No one made a sound to disturb them, so as not to become an excuse for the Su family. Su Zipei skillfully handled the beggar's chicken that had been gutted. She gradually forgot the existence of others. Mr. Zhou nodded frequently. But after all, he could only eat but not cook. He couldn't see the specific knack. He didn't see other chefs frowning at the same time. He sure looked behind and couldn't help but feel strange. Although this kind of craftsmanship is skilled, it is absolutely not exquisite. This kind of defect. Miss Su may have a unique insight on the control of the fire. It's not good to make a judgment for the time being. Let's wait and see. Su Zipei didn't know that she was seen through by others. She continued to follow the steps in the recipe until the mud embryo was formed. Su Huanli finally breathed a sigh of relief. Butler, I am right, right? Zipei is no worse than Arya. Li Yin didn't say anything and sighed in his heart. Master, you only watched the third miss cooking, but you didn't see that the chefs' faces were getting more and more serious. Su Zipei fixed the mud embryo on the barbecue grill. The helper immediately came to put the charcoal brazier. The last step should be the easiest. Su Zipei's eyes were bright. She gently held the joystick that shook the mud embryo. Usually in the kitchen, the helpers used the oven to roast. In this way, the beggar's chicken was roasted without the fragrance of charcoal, but the time could be reduced a lot. The whole production process was reduced to 4 hours. But if the method in Su Li's recipe was used, the whole production process was nearly 6 hours. The roasting process took up 4 hours. Su Zipei thought that this was the difference between the precious beggar's chicken and the ordinary beggar's chicken. Just turn the face once an hour. Chapter 39. After 4 hours of baking, everyone dozed off. Even Su Huanli fell asleep peacefully on one side. Only the 7 chefs in the field and He Shi, who stood at the door of the back kitchen, were still watching intently. Especially He Shi, his face was extremely gloomy at the moment. A feeling of being cheated and humiliated filled his heart. He even began to doubt whether it was right to make the decision to change jobs. Clang! Fang Yuan knocked the gongs and drums expressionlessly, and everyone suddenly woke up. Su Zipei struggled to lift the grill, put the roasted beggar's chicken on the plate, and moved the grill away. It's done. Su Zipei showed a lovely smile, and her clear voice resounded in the field, "Seniors, please have a taste." Mr. Zhou rubbed his sleepy eyes and saw the mud ball, which was darker than the color of the usual restaurant. His eyes suddenly brightened. "Come on, give it to everyone to have a taste. Hurry up." The shopkeeper pointed to Fang Yuan and urged. Among these waiters, Fang Yuan's skill of knocking the mud shell was the best. Fang Yuan stepped forward indifferently, picked up the small iron hammer on the table, glanced at Su Zipei, who was looking at him contemptuously and full of confidence, and hit it with the hammer. Crack! The mud shell was evenly split into 2 halves from the middle, and the onlookers cheered. The old butler standing beside Su Huanli narrowed his pupils slightly, and his turbid eyes flashed. The fragrance is right. It is beggar's chicken. It seems to be more fragrant. It smells so good. I want to eat it. As the onlookers swallowed their saliva, plates of cut chicken were placed in front of the 8 judges one after another. Mr. Zhou couldn't wait to take a big bite, and the other 7 chefs each cut a small piece and put it into their mouths. Soon, Mr. Zhou's face changed. Su Huanli thought that he was going to say some flattering words, but the next moment, he opened his mouth and spat out all the chicken he ate. Bah! What is it? Such old meat? This is not beggar's chicken at all. Mr. Zhou was very angry and said angrily, Boss Su, I need an explanation. The other 7 chefs put down their chopsticks and commented one after another, it's raw and not cooked. Half-cooked. The skill of roasting is too poor. His skill in handling the chicken is very skilled, but not exquisite. There are indeed a lot of new ingredients in it, but it's not perfect. This girl's culinary skills can only be said to be at the beginner level. It's a waste of such a good recipe. The 7 chefs didn't say a word, but Su Zipei's face became paler and paler until there was no blood. She sat on the ground in embarrassment. Impossible. Impossible, I clearly followed the recipe, I clearly, personally stole it from her room. Fang Yuan's ears twitched and his eyes flashed. As expected, she wasn't the real culinary genius. Then, impossible. How can I lose to her? Su Zipei suddenly stood up and screamed, spilling the ingredients on the table like a crazy woman. Her silky hair was in a mess, and her bright and clean dress was full of wrinkles. He was so ugly that he couldn't bear to look at him. I am the best. I'm the best. The place was eerily silent, except for Su Zipei who was clamoring. Su Huanli was so shocked that he was at a loss. The old butler quickly knocked Su Zipei out and took her away. For a time, people on both sides were speechless and didn't know what to say. At this time, a ruffian picked up the spilled chicken on the ground and stuffed it into his mouth. He hummed, well, it tastes good. But the meat is not cooked yet. My wife can at least cook the meat. Is she a genius? Ha 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 ha. Everyone burst into laughter. Su Huanli's old face was so red that it almost dripped blood. After today, his Su family would be the biggest joke in the Desu town. The restaurant would be ruined. Even the Zhu and Yang families could use this reason to blackmail him for a lot of money. When thinking of the future, Su Huanli only felt that his eyes were black and he almost fainted. Master, the only thing we can do now is to let second miss come here. Li Yin reminded Su Huanli, and he suddenly woke up. Yes, I still have area. Butler, bring area here quickly. I'll appease Mr. Zhou and others. After that, he glanced at Su Zipei who had fainted and immediately gnashed his teeth with hatred, bitch, take her back to her mother. Don't let me see her in the future. Li Yin took a deep look at Su Huanli and turned away. Su Huanli didn't have time to think about the meaning of that look. At this moment, he calmed down his mood and pretended to be angry and walked into the lobby. Seeing him come out, people who felt deeply deceived flocked to him. The simple and honest man yesterday stood out and sneered, Head Su, what else do you want to say now? Mr. Zhou shook his head, Head Su, I didn't expect you to be such a person. I will not come to your restaurant to eat in the future. This will be the shame of my life. Integrity is the foundation of doing business. Head Su, you'd better go back to school and study for a few years. The other owners of the restaurant jumped out to speak, each more mean than the other. Su Huanli stretched out his hand and pressed it with a complicated expression, Everyone, I didn't expect that Zipei would lie to me, so I'm sorry for deceiving you. In fact, I have more than one daughter. Zipei also has a sister. Zipei followed the recipes studied by her sister before. I didn't expect that Zipei would deceive her relatives for the sake of reputation. At the critical moment, Su Huanli sold Su Zipei without hesitation. In an instant, the restaurant fell into silence. They didn't expect that there would be such a turnaround in this situation. I remember. Last year, a daughter of the Su family stole treasures and sent the master of the Yang family to be recommended, which made all the previous investment of the Su family in vain. Someone in the crowd came to a sudden realization. With this reminder, many people recalled such an incident. I also remember. But wasn't she driven out of the Su family? Why? Why are the daughters of the Su family all sneaky? It's really, some women couldn't help but talk. Fang Yuan felt uncomfortable listening. He didn't believe that Su Li would do that kind of thing. Su Huanli shook his head helplessly and said loudly, "Everyone, be quiet. Please listen to my explanation. In fact, these are all family scandals, which should not be publicized. However, since Zipei has a bad character, I can't continue to hide it for her. In fact, it was Zipei who stole things last year. Later, she framed her second sister, which made me make a decision that I regretted very much." It was so. The crowd was in an uproar. The honest man was also caught off guard by Su Huanli's sudden self-explosion and didn't know what to say. Fang Yuan didn't say anything, but his mouth was slightly raised. "Master Su, I'm not meddlesome. This matter is related to your innocence. How can you know the truth but not report it? Instead, you cover up Su Zipei. What do you think of your other daughter by doing this?" Mr. Zhou accused loudly. Su Huanli was ashamed and said, "Yes, yes, yes. Mr. Zhou is right. I have informed the housekeeper to let my second daughter come here. I think you will see her soon. How about asking you to taste her dishes at that time?" Mr. Zhou pondered for a moment and nodded, "It's okay. But the other 7 are busy people. I don't know if they can wait for a few more hours." "It doesn't matter. We also want to see what the real cooking genius of the Su family is like." The chefs who came to find trouble shook their heads and said. "By the way, he sure came over and said, I haven't asked the name of the second Mississippi, yes. The name of the third miss is Su Zipei. I think the name of the second miss is not bad, right?" Su Huanli was instantly dumbfounded. How could he say the name of Su area? "Head Su, why don't you speak?" Su Huanli's face turned red. When he was about to say, "Su area," with difficulty, he heard a crisp and sweet voice like an oriole coming from the kitchen. "Su Li." Su Li calmly stepped into the lobby and gracefully saluted, "My name is Su Li. I am the Su of the Su family and the Li of the Lin Li. It's my honor to meet all the seniors of the kitchen school." Fang Yuan stared blankly at the woman in a white dress with a pure smile as before. His heart rippled. It turned out that her name was Su Li. Su Li only wore a very simple dress, which was not as luxurious as Su Zipei. But every inch of her face and every inch of her figure was perfect. She was like a lotus out of the water, showing a noble temperament out of thin air. She was like a pavilion in the moon, cold and untouchable. What virtue did Su Huanli accumulate in his last life? How could he have a fairy-like daughter? This thought came to everyone's mind at the same time. They completely forgot the scandal of the Su family and only saw Su Li's figure. Even those middle-aged women were jealous and never mentioned Su Zipei again. "I wonder if the 8 seniors would like to accompany me to cook a precious beggar's chicken?" Su Li asked with a smile. Mr. Zhou suddenly came to his sense and laughed to cover up his embarrassment, "Of course. Miss Su Li, please. Let's sit back." After he finished speaking, he returned to his seat. His figure was a little disheveled. "Daddy, I heard it from the housekeeper. Leave it to me." Su Li said softly and turned to instruct the helpers to prepare the ingredients again. Su Huanli saw that Su Li didn't blame him but only comforted him. He was so moved that he cried, "Arya, I am really wrong. If you can save the crisis, I will let you take care of the restaurant in the future." Su Li didn't show joy but said anxiously, "Daddy, what are you talking about? The restaurant belongs to the Su family. It's the same no matter who manages it. I hope you don't blame me for changing the name. I don't blame you. Su Huanli wiped his tears and said, if you didn't think of a nice name, I would make a fool of myself again. I believe that you can think of a better name if you have some time. Su Li squinted and smiled. Su Huanli quickly waved his hand and refused, no way. Your name has been reported. How can you change it? You will be called Su Li in the future. It sounds much better than Su area. Chapter 40. Cooking was not difficult for Su Li at all. Whether it was the knife skills or the heat, they were all mastered to the peak. The 8 people sitting on the judges' seats, he sure, and the ordinary people standing behind to watch the fun were all fascinated. It turns out that cooking can also be described as smooth. If she practices martial arts, maybe she will be more talented. Fang Yuan was fascinated. He even saw a trace of the realm of the integration of nature and human beings from Su Li's cooking. He couldn't help but be surprised. The same ingredients, the same steps. The performance of Su Zipei and Su Li could be described as heaven and earth. When people saw Su Li's ingenious handling of ingredients, they couldn't help but exclaim. No one dozed off for nearly 3 hours. Sorry to keep you waiting. Su Li put the roasted beggar's chicken and turned back with a sweet smile. She said, who can help me knock it open? I'm a little tired. I'm afraid that I can't master the strength well. As soon as she said that, a group of waiters all looked at Fang Yuan. Although they couldn't wait to fly to the second miss immediately, they didn't have the skills. So, they didn't want to make a fool of themselves in front of the second Mississippi. Fang Yuan's face turned red. He walked forward and picked up the hammer without saying anything. It turns out that you are really here. I also asked the mammy to inquire about your whereabouts. Su Li said softly. Fang Yuan's ears turned red and the hammer almost missed. He knocked the mud shell and ran away. It seemed that he was running away. Everyone had been firmly attracted by the fragrance and didn't notice the small movements of the two. This was a fragrance that was enough to make people lose their minds. I'll do it first. Mr. Zhou was drooling. He rushed to the table and cut off most of the chicken with a knife. Shameless. The other 7 chefs suddenly became angry and rushed to grab it together. The scene suddenly became chaotic. The ruffians in the crowd didn't remember to continue to bewitch people. They rushed to grab the chicken that was still steaming. Guards, I'm going to be crushed to death. Fortunately, the constables were strong-willed and soon separated the crowd. Looking at the dirty beggar's chicken that had fallen on the ground, everyone couldn't help but smile bitterly. Now, no one has anything to eat. Mr. Zhou almost cried. A beggar's eyes lit up. He struggled to break free from the constable's restraint. In the exclamation of the crowd, he directly picked up the beggar's chicken on the ground and ran away, leaving only the lingering fragrance lingering in the nose. Senior Zhou, you don't have to do this. Su Li stood out and seemed to be scared by the scene just now. She said in a timid voice, I remember that Mr. Zhou ranked first in the order of the precious beggar's chicken. Tomorrow I will make a precious beggar's chicken and send it to you. Mr. Zhou was overjoyed. Thank you, Miss Su. I'll go back and wait for your good news. After seeing Miss Su Li today, I know that there is always someone better than me. The 7 of us are convinced. If there's a chance in the future, we hope to learn from Miss Su. The 7 chefs came over and said with a smile. Su Li hurriedly saluted, I dare not. Su Li is young. I should ask you for advice. Ha ha ha. The 7 of them laughed heartily upon hearing such compliments. After exchanging some pleasantries, the disturbance in the restaurant completely subsided, and the chefs of the restaurant took their leave. The simple and honest man didn't say anything and left with a face of regret. In front of the absolute delicacies, no conspiracy or trick could bring down the Byway building. In addition, there was a cooking genius who was as beautiful as a fairy. The task given by the county magistrate was a complete failure. The next day, the byway building reopened and the business was more prosperous. Many waiters found that there were many childs who came to the restaurant for dinner. These childs looked around when they came in and were absent-minded when they ordered dishes. It was obvious that they had ulterior motives. The shopkeeper smirked and took these childs to order all the signature dishes. When they were impatient, he explained, "Childs, the miss of the owner of the restaurant usually studies at home and occasionally comes to the restaurant. Now the miss is not here. I'm afraid that you will be disappointed." Although those childs didn't like it, they pretended to be generous and said that it didn't matter and they would come again another day. The shopkeeper also took the opportunity to get a lot of benefits. He was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth all day long. Suli became busier. She practiced and read in the morning and cooked in the afternoon. She didn't have time to check the operation of the restaurant until the evening. But even so, she would personally check the accounts of the restaurant every day and then give them to Su Huanli. Su Huanli regretted that he impulsively handed over the management of the restaurant to Suli that day. But when he found that the business of the restaurant became better than before, he immediately felt lucky. In addition, Suli submitted the accounts every day, which made Su Huanli feel that everything was under control. With someone doing chores for him, he was much more relaxed and had more time to care about the operation of the silk store. By the way, because of the relationship between the restaurant, the cooperation of the three families became closer. In addition, some people deliberately flattered Suli because of her beauty. The silk store of the Su family also opened a new way and the business was much better. After the business of the restaurant stabilized, Suli added the fried glutinous rice balls with sesame to the dishes of the restaurant. The price was still 300 copper coins. This move immediately won the praise of the people in the Desu town. "I haven't eaten the fried glutinous rice balls with sesame for a long time. Miss Su is really fast. I thought that the price of the fried glutinous rice balls with sesame would be higher. I didn't expect that the price was not increased. Miss Su is really conscientious in doing business. Our Desu town is really blessed to have such a person as Miss Su. The delicious food here is much more than that in other towns." For a time, there were voices of praise for Su Li everywhere. Su Li's fame and prestige both soared. If it was in the past, people in the Desu town did not know that there was such a person as Su Li. But now, if someone said that he did not know Su Li, he would be despised by others. The change before and after could be seen. After finishing this thing, Su Li kept a low profile. She read and learned to read every day and tried not to show her face when she went out. Qi Xianqing, who had been observing in the dark, could not help but praise her. In many praises, she was neither arrogant nor impetuous and still lived like an ordinary person. Even those adults who had been through hardships in Jianghu might not be able to do that. But his little apprentice did it. He could die in peace to have such an excellent apprentice in his old age. "Miss," the shopkeeper sent the accounts. One afternoon, Mammy Li came in and shouted. Speaking of which, she was the one who had the most comfortable time of the month. Since the miss took over the restaurant, her status among the mammies also rose sharply. She had a tendency to surpass the personal mammy of the first madam. Now, those maids who used to roll their eyes when seeing her would all stop and respectfully call her Mammy Li. Although she did not understand how such a big piece of meat of the restaurant came into the hands of the miss, it did not prevent her from being happy for the miss. Now, the first madam could no longer bully the miss. In the room, Suli stopped humming and put away the poisonous sound insect. Then she said, "Let him in." Hearing this, the flattering shopkeeper immediately put on a smile and went to Suli to present the account book. "Miss, this is the account of the restaurant today. Please have a look." Suli took it and turned it page by page. The study was extremely quiet. The shopkeeper did not know why he suddenly felt uneasy. Even the old master could not see it. Second miss, could not see it. Shopkeeper Wu. Su suddenly said. The shopkeeper was shocked and quickly replied, I am here. Su smiled gently and said, Shopkeeper Wu, don't be nervous. Speaking of which, you have worked for our Su family for less than 3 months. Miss, you are right. Shopkeeper Wu was relieved and said with a smile, my former boss is Minister Li. The restaurant is very busy these days, and I have schoolwork. Shopkeeper, you have worked hard. Su apologized, I remember that your monthly salary is no more than 20 taels. I can give you 10 taels. What do you think? Shopkeeper Wu was overjoyed and kowtowed again and again, thank you, Second Mississippi. Second Miss, you are really the reincarnation of Buddha. Shopkeeper Wu, you don't have to do this. I have also made comments on the account book. You can send it to my father. Su handed out the account book. Shopkeeper Wu quickly took it with both hands and left respectfully. After Shopkeeper Wu left, Mammy Li sighed, fortunately, Shopkeeper Wu is here. Otherwise, you will have a hard time. Su nodded slightly, but her smile was inexplicably meaningful. Shopkeeper Wu retreated to the outside of the Jinyuan court, and the joy on his face gradually faded. It's just 10 taels. Do you really think I will be grateful? Shopkeeper Wu looked sullen. It was really shameful for him to bow to a teenage girl. After wandering in the Su house for a while, Shopkeeper Wu calmed himself down and put on a smile again. Then he hurried to the main courtyard. Su tidied up the table and got up to inform Mammy Li. Then she took the carriage specially arranged by the Su house to the town as usual. The weather was slightly hot, and there were blooming rape flowers along the road. Su lifted the curtain of the carriage and gently leaned on the back of the chair. There was a rare trace of tiredness in her black eyes. During this time, Zhu Yan and Su Zipei were completely quiet and well-behaved. Su didn't know whether they were too shocked before or they had other plans. However, according to the old butler, Zhu Yan still went out from time to time. But no matter how they investigated, they couldn't find her whereabouts. Compared with the Zhu family, the foundation of the Su family is still too weak. Su put one hand on the edge of the window, and her slender fingers gently tapped the window, making a dong-dong sound. Her eyes flickered, and no one knew what she was thinking. When they arrived at the Desu town, the carriage stopped at the back door of the Baiwei building. Su calmly walked into the Baiwei building. When the helper who was adding firewood to the boiler saw her, he immediately stood up and wiped his face. Then he respectfully and loudly said, Hello, Second Miss. Hello, Second Miss. Along the way, every helper deliberately stopped to salute. Su always responded with a faint smile. Those helpers immediately worked harder as if they were injected with chicken blood. It was not simply because of her beauty. On the second day when Su took charge of the Baiwei building, she not only immediately issued a month's salary, but also doubled the salary of all helpers. Second Miss, you are here. He sure wiped his hands and came out of the kitchen. He shouted enthusiastically with respect and even reverence on his face. This month, he asked Su for a lot of cooking skills. He found that every word Su said seemed simple, but it could bring him infinite inspiration. She was a real master of cooking. Compared with her, his realm was really too low. Chapter 41. Uncle He, is everything okay? Su looked at the front hall full of diners and turned back to ask. He sure laughed loudly, thanks to you, the business of the restaurant is good. I make much more money here than in the previous restaurant. That's good. I have nothing else to do today. I heard that Fang Yuan has a younger sister. The place where they live is not peaceful. I see that there are a lot of vacant rooms for helpers in the restaurant, so I want to arrange a single room for them. He sure was surprised and happy, I see. I think Fang Yuan wants to go home all day long. I thought he was lazy and slack off. Since you are so considerate for the helpers in the restaurant, you don't need to worry that the restaurant is not prosperous. Without further ado, I will find him. Thank you, Uncle He. Su Li nodded and thanked him. After a while, he sure came with Fang Yuan, who was confused, with a smile on his face. Miss, I'm going to busy myself. The kitchen can't do without me. He sure said hello and left. Only Su Li and Fang Yuan were left at the door of the back hall. Fang Yuan stood silently and his heart was pounding. He sure didn't tell him the specific things, so he didn't know why Su Li wanted to find him. Seeing that Fang Yuan was nervous but pretended to be calm, Su Li smiled and said, Fang Yuan, I give you half a day off today. Lead the way. Holiday? Where to? Fang Yuan was confused. Of course, to your residence. Su Li took it for granted, which made Fang Yuan more confused. The relationship between him and Su Li was not close. To be precise, he had complex thoughts. He never thought that one day Su Li would take the initiative to find him. After 5 minutes, Fang Yuan led Su Li to walk on the road to the South Street, and the blush on his face had not faded. Sin. How could I have that idea? The salary Su Li gave him solved his urgent need. His sister didn't have to starve. He wanted to make more money to change his residence. He didn't expect that Su Li would take the initiative to help them. Fang Yuan, tell me. Didn't I give you 500 taels before? Su Li asked curiously, why do you live in the South Street? Fang Yuan was ashamed and said honestly, I feel sorry for Mississippi. All the money was stolen before. That's why my sister and I can only stay here. We even troubled Miss to come to such a place. It's really. Don't call yourself a villain in front of me. Su Li said in a soft voice, I can see that your groveling is just a facade. Deep down, he should be a very proud person. He was just temporarily wronged for the sake of a better life. As for me, I don't like the feeling of being superior at all. How about we call each other friends? Fang Yuan was slightly shocked. Looking at Su Li's pure and transparent eyes, he was stunned for a while. She wants to be friends with me. Can a person like me really do it? Ah! Suddenly, a scream pierced through the sunset. The scream was common in the South Street, but it made Fang Yuan change his face suddenly. He rushed to the direction of the scream like a madman. Little sister. Su Li narrowed her eyes and immediately followed him. Fang Yuan burst out his full strength in an instant. He crossed a street like a residual shadow, turned into an alley, and rushed into the mansion at the end. Boom! 2 heavy wooden doors were kicked open by Fang Yuan. A large group of ruffians with untidy clothes came into view. Fang Ling was lying in the middle of the ruffians. She had been stripped to her underwear. Brother! Fang Ling screamed hoarsely. She was so ashamed that she wanted to die. Her limbs were pressed, but she couldn't even cover her eyes. Fang Yuan's eyes were red. He looked at more than a dozen strong men in the courtyard and gnashed his teeth, you all deserve to die. Ha 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 ha, the head of the ruffians with a naked upper body suddenly laughed. He pointed at Fang Yuan and almost couldn't stand up straight, brothers, did you hear that? This little boy even said that we all deserve to die. Several others suddenly became interested. They put down Fang Ling and slowly walked to Fang Yuan and surrounded him. The head of the ruffians looked at Fang Yuan, who was only as high as his shoulder. He sneered and bent down. He patted Fang Yuan's face with his palm and arrogantly said, Boy, I am here. You kill me. Do you dare to kill people? Have you ever killed people? It's so funny. Now even a little boy dares to climb on my head. Puff. The head of the ruffians widened his eyes and looked down at the dagger inserted in his heart. The cold and sharp pain spread all over his body in an instant. This boy really dared to kill people. You all have to die. Fang Yuan quickly pulled out the dagger and the blood splashed on his face. When other ruffians were still in a daze, he easily inserted the dagger into another man's heart. At this time, more than a dozen ruffians reacted and showed fear. They had never seen such a ruthless kid who killed people. But they were also ruffians who had seen blood. Stimulated by the blood, they didn't escape. Instead, they showed ferocity and drew out their broadswords and rushed over. The eldest brother and the fourth brother are dead. Revenge for them. He is only one person, and we have 16. Don't be afraid. Kill him. Fang Yuan looked cold, as if he had turned into a weapon without temperature. He shuttled in the crowd. His dagger was like a poisonous snake. Every time he waved it, it would cut the throat of a ruffian and take away a life. The smell of blood quickly spread in the courtyard. Clang! The knife and the dagger collided and made a crisp sound. The strong shock made the ruffian's mouth bleed, but he grinned grimly. Brother, be careful. Fang Ling saw the shadow behind Fang Yuan and immediately screamed in horror. Fang Yuan screamed in his heart, but he had no time to dodge. He was hugged by the ruffian behind and couldn't move. The ruffian in front of him immediately chopped down. Puff! The knife went into his flesh. Under the severe pain, Fang Yuan's pupils contracted. He didn't know where he got the strength from. In the blink of an eye, he broke away from the arms of the ruffian behind him and got out from the crotch of the ruffian in front of him. At the same time, he threw the dagger in his hand and pierced the necks of 2 ruffians. Clang! Plop! The dagger fell to the ground. With the sound of the corpses, the courtyard returned to silence. Fang Yuan sat on the ground and gasped a few times with his hands on his shoulders. He didn't have time to bandage the wound. He limped to the front of his sister and took off his coat to cover her. Fang Ling stared at her brother in a daze. Her eyes were full of tears. After a while, she finally cried. It's all right. Everything is all right. Fang Yuan held his sister tightly in his arms. His hands, which were covered with blood and had never been soft-hearted when killing people, were slightly trembling at this moment. If Su Li didn't come back with him. Yes, Su Li. Fang Yuan suddenly woke up. At this moment, there was a rustling sound of footsteps behind him. Fang Yuan's mouth was full of bitterness. He could hear the footsteps every day. He didn't need to look back to know who it was. Sure enough, how could a person like him become a friend with her? He was a devil whose hands were covered with blood. How could an ordinary and kind girl like Su Li accept it? They were not people of the same world at all. Miss Su. Taking a deep breath, Fang Yuan said in a low voice, maybe you can't understand what I do. I won't hurt you. We won't appear in the Desu town in the future. If you want to report to the government, go ahead. After he said this, the footsteps stopped behind Fang Yuan and there was no response for a long time. Fang Yuan felt pain in his heart. What should Su Li's expression be now? Was she scared, frightened, or overwhelmed? He was so damned that she saw such a terrible scene. Brother, suddenly, Fang Ling's voice pulled Fang Yuan back to reality. Fang Ling raised her head and looked through Fang Yuan with a puzzled look. She said, Brother, look. Sister Su is smiling. Fang Yuan looked back in amazement and saw Su Li squatting down with a gentle smile. Her spotless skirt was suddenly stained with mud. Her tone was as usual, even with a trace of coquettishness. Little fool, these people deserve to die. How can I report to the government? At this moment, Fang Yuan was stunned. No matter how rich his imagination was, he didn't expect that Su Li's reaction would be so unusual. It was simply against common sense. At this moment, he even misunderstood. Was the concept of women in the Dahan country different from that in the Nanjiang country? You have a lot to ask, and I have a lot to ask. Su Li took off her cloak and tied it for Fang Ling. She said indifferently, everyone has a painful past. There is no need to expose others' scars. It's better not to ask. What do you think of helping each other in the future? Under the cold moonlight, in the courtyard full of corpses, the girl's understatement proposal made the smell of blood lighter. Helping each other? Fang Yuan frowned and looked at the corpses all over the ground. People like me, killing can be a means to achieve the goal, but it is also troublesome. Su Li stepped out and took out a small black porcelain bottle from her waist. You killed these 16 people impulsively, which is troublesome. When someone finds them tomorrow, you and your sister will lose a stable life and flee for your lives. Su Li walked to the nearest corpse and stopped. She looked back and smiled. You are worried about this. Am I right? Yes, what can you do? At this moment, Fang Yuan finally recovered the ability to think, and his eyes were full of fear. The Su Li in front of him was still Su Li, but not the usual Su Li. She was the real Su Li. She was a terrible woman who hid more deeply than him. Let them disappear. Su Li poured the powder on the corpses, and the blood gave out a fragrance. Soon, the corpses melted into clear water, and even the bones were not left. Who will care about some ruffians missing in the South Street? Su Li easily melted the corpses, and Fang Yuan suddenly had goosebumps. He opened his mouth and didn't know what to say. The kind and simple Su Li in his mind gradually went away and couldn't be reached. At this moment, the real Su Li was more elusive. How could this miss, who was born in a peaceful and ordinary family, have such terrible means? No matter how knowledgeable he was, he felt that what happened in front of him was too strange. It was completely dark when Su Li cleaned the traces in the courtyard. She got up and put away the black porcelain bottle. She patted the soil on the edge of her skirt and looked up at Fang Yuan's shoulder that was still bleeding. She frowned and said, "Your injury is not serious, but you also need to rest. Go to bandage it and then go back to the restaurant." Okay. Fang Yuan answered absent-mindedly. With the help of his sister, the three returned to the courtyard together. After lighting the oil lamp, Su Li carefully applied medicine to the wound of Fang Yuan's flesh and blood. Although Fang Ling was not seriously injured, she was frightened and fell asleep on one side. Fang Yuan's upper body was naked, and his face was hot. Fortunately, the light of the oil lamp was very dim, and Su Li couldn't see it, which made him relieved. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, "I have been on the battlefield and killed a lot of people. I even killed the old and the children. You really don't mind?" Su Li looked up and was slightly stunned. Then she shook her head and chuckled, "People in Jianghu can't help themselves. Who dares to say that they are innocent? I believe you. At least you won't kill innocent people for your own selfish desires, right?" Fang Yuan nodded with a complicated look. He didn't expect that he would be relieved one day. Su Li lowered her head to deal with the wound, and her eyes were gloomy. His thoughts drifted away unconsciously, the execution ground of the previous life. It was 1:15 p.m, and the sun was shining. "Su Li, you damn devil. In order to practice the poisonous martial arts, you trapped and killed 200,000 soldiers of the Dahan country, which led to the victory of the enemy country and made the people homeless and homeless. The monstrous crimes you have committed are too numerous to be listed. Devil, you broke up my family. I can't wait to eat your flesh and drink your blood. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect that you would have such a day. God is fair. He must let you taste the pain and die." Chapter 42. When the lanterns were lit, Su Li returned to the inn with Fang Yuan and his sister. Shopkeeper Wu, who was anxious, immediately breathed a sigh of relief and greeted her, "Miss, you finally come back. Why did it take you so long?" Shopkeeper Wu passed by Su Li and looked at Fang Yuan. He was a little gloomy and blamed, "Fang, how can you let Miss go to the South Street with you? If Miss is in danger, can you bear the responsibility?" Fang Yuan's expression was obscure and complicated, but he didn't say anything and looked at Su Li. Su Li waved her hand and said softly, "Shopkeeper Wu, you don't need to blame Fang Yuan. It's my fault. Fang Yuan's sister caught a cold, so I decided to take her to the Bai Chao Tang. That's why she was delayed. But she didn't encounter any other danger." "I see." Shopkeeper Wu looked at Su Li and immediately became gentle. He smiled and said, "Today I went to the old master. The old master also praised that Mrs. account annotation was excellent." "Miss, you are really a genius." Su Li chuckled and didn't answer. After arranging the residence of Fang Yuan and his sister, she returned to the Su house by carriage. "Mammy, I feel a little tired today. You should also go to bed early." After dinner, Su Li ordered Mammy Li. Mammy Li quickly agreed. She helped Su Li take a bath and lie down. Then she left. When Mammy Li's breath completely disappeared, Su Li sat up from the bed. Her eyes were clear. Today, she witnessed Fang Yuan's bloody battle and recalled the previous life. She had all kinds of insights in her heart. At this time, practicing would inevitably yield half the result with twice the effort. She rebuked Mammy Li in order to have enough time to digest what she had learned. In the early morning of the next day, the light of dawn shone into the room. Wisps of purple steam shrouded around the bed, like a fairyland. When the rooster crowed, the dense purple air immediately surged and submerged into Su Li's body like a whale sucking water. "Hu!" Su Li exhaled a turbid breath. Her eyelashes trembled slightly, and then she slowly opened her clear eyes. The air in front of her twisted for a moment and then returned to calm. "I didn't expect that I have reached the acquired 9th hurdle in this life in less than half a year. I only need a little opportunity to reach the inborn realm." Su Li looked down at her white and slender hands with no joy or sorrow in her eyes. She still remembered that in her previous life, she had used up all of her potential due to improper cultivation and was stuck at Hotian realm level 8. In the end, she relied on the poison scripture and broke her own hands in exchange for Hotian realm level 9. However, she was discovered by the righteous and was hunted down. In this life, she was only 15 years old, but she had already practiced the 5th hurdle of Ghost Valley meditation direction and reached the level of Qi Xianqing. In terms of Xiangong cultivation, she was only slightly weaker than Qi Xianqing. Of course, in terms of curing and saving people, Qi Xianqing deserved the title of miracle-working doctor. His skill of bringing the dead back to life was far better than hers. In her previous life, the Ghost Valley meditation direction lacked the first 5 hurdles, so she misinterpreted it as a killing skill. After mastering the first 5 hurdles in this life, she realized the method of fighting poison with poison. The collection of poisonous grasses and medicinal herbs is still too little. There are many methods that I can't use. If I encounter a strong enemy, I will definitely not be their opponent. But Big Brother hasn't returned yet, so I still have enough time to prepare. Various thoughts flashed through Su Li's eyes. After controlling the Bai Wei building, her plan could finally be preliminarily launched. After breakfast, before Su Li went to the school of the East Courtyard, the butler hurriedly came to her and said, "Miss, the seasoning raw materials in the nearby mountain forest have all been picked and processed. I sent people to try planting, but they have not been successful. Miss, do you have any way?" Su Li's eyes flickered slightly and her tone was gentle. "Grandpa Butler, how long can the seasoning stored in the Su family last?" Li Yin laughed and said, "Miss, rest assured. As long as we don't expand the business, the raw materials are enough to support a year's quantity." "Then I can rest assured. The failure of the trial is mostly due to the inconsistency of the season. 1 year is enough to try out the correct planting season." Li Yin was slightly stunned and immediately praised, "I am so stupid that I didn't think of this." "Miss, you are so smart." Su Li blushed and said with a smile, Without my reminder, Grandpa Butler can also think of it in a few days. Li Yin joked and left with a smile. Su Li's smile was slightly restrained. She cleaned up and came to the school of the East Courtyard. Qi Xianqing had already been waiting there. After reading the book and waiting for Su Qinghao to leave, Qi Xianqing got up and walked to Su Li. He said with relief, "Yes, you have mastered the nothing unusual. Don't spend too much time on it. Just keep the appearance before the transformation. Let me see if you have made progress in Xiangong recently." "Yes, master." Su Li nodded and rushed to Qi Xianqing in an instant. A breeze swayed in the whole school. Qi Xianqing's eyes widened. The cultivation of this girl had reached the critical point of the third hurdle of the Ghost Valley meditation direction. She could step into the third hurdle and touch the true meaning of this unique martial art. "Come on." Qi Xianqing praised her and then started to practice with Su Li. An hour later, Su Li stopped pretending to be out of breath. Qi Xianqing looked at his precious apprentice and couldn't help but smile brightly on his old face. Fang Yuan was confused and had many questions in his heart. But he also knew that it was not the time to ask questions, so he followed her. The dark night perfectly covered their traces. Fang Yuan followed Su Li over a small hill. When he saw the scene at the foot of the hill, he was shocked. "This is the secret warehouse of the Su family?" Fang Yuan turned his head and glanced at Su Li, who looked calm. He whispered, "Why do you take me here? Is it?" He remembered that Su Li asked him to park the carriage not far from the back hill. Su Li took out a stick of incense from nowhere and put it in Fang Yuan's hand. She whispered, "It's the east wind tonight. The effect of this incense can last for 6 hours. Go." Fang Yuan's blood froze. She really wanted to steal things from the warehouse. But wasn't she a member of the Su family? Why did she steal things from her own family? With this thought in mind, Fang Yuan took out a match and lit the incense. He covered his nose and went down the hill like a ghost. The incense was colorless and odorless. It was blown into the warehouse with the east wind. Before long, Fang Yuan heard several sounds of people falling to the ground. The whole secret warehouse fell into silence. Until the 8th sound of people falling to the ground, Su Li calmly walked down the mountain road and stood in front of Fang Yuan. She said, "Bring the carriage. We don't have much time." Fang Yuan reluctantly turned and left. Su Li walked into the house and glanced at the guards who fell to the ground. She listened attentively. After confirming that there was no extra breathing sound, she took the key from the waist of the guards and opened the warehouse doors one by one. Fang Yuan parked the carriage and came in. When he saw the things in the warehouse, he couldn't help but feel strange and asked, "What do you want?" "The things piled up here are either cloth or food ingredients. If you want to exchange these for money, it is better to go directly to the accounting office to steal money." Su Li gently shook her head and quickly found the seasoning raw materials piled up in a warehouse following the fragrance. Fang Yuan followed and saw it. He was shocked and thought of the key. He blurted out, "Do you want to move all of them and let the Byway building go bankrupt?" "The Byway building is a tool for producing gold. How can I let it go bankrupt? I just come to take what belongs to me." Su Li said vaguely, "Just leave the amount of raw materials for one day. Wouldn't it mean that 99% of the raw materials would be moved away?" Fang Yuan was shocked. Su Li gently smiled and pointed to the raw materials bags piled up to the roof. She said, "There are still 6 hours before dawn. You have to hurry up." "Do I move them alone?" Fang Yuan couldn't help but ask. He turned his head and saw that Su Li smiled and showed her white teeth. She said, "Do you want me to move them?" You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.